Chapter 1. The Rivers family, the wealthiest in South City, had found their granddaughter, who had been missing for 18 years in a small country town. Walter Rivers, the family patriarch, had lost his son in middle age, and his daughter-in-law had followed in death soon after. Now, well into his 60s, and with no other close relatives, he was ecstatic to finally be reunited with the granddaughter who had vanished at just 3 months old. He threw a lavish party that lasted for 3 days and nights at the Ocean View Grand, South City's most luxurious mansion. As close family friends, the Blackwood family was also in attendance. Amidst the joyful music and clinking glasses, Aidan Blackwood, the youngest of the 3 Blackwood brothers, drained his glass of expensive red wine, his face etched with boredom. "Can I leave yet?" he grumbled. His second brother, Dylan Blackwood, shook his head, his expression as cool and aloof as ever. "No," he said, sparing his words. Aidan's frown deepened. He turned to his eldest brother, who had remained silent. "Is this Miss Rivers ever going to show up? It's been 3 days, and we haven't even seen a shadow of her." What was with all the mystery? Or perhaps a thought struck him. "I heard she's been living in the countryside all this time. They say she's ugly and uncivilized. Now that she's suddenly a rags-to-riches heiress, you don't think she's too scared to show her face, do you?" His eldest brother, Julian Blackwood, didn't answer. Aidan continued, his face contorted in misery. "Just thinking about grandfather's plan for an arranged marriage with the Rivers family makes me want to throw up. I can't even eat." At the mention of this, the other 2 brothers' expressions shifted, their dark eyes flickering with complicated emotions. Just then, the entire venue fell silent. Walter Rivers was finally making his entrance, his granddaughter on his arm. The crowd held its breath, eagerly awaiting the appearance of the newly minted heiress. And now, let's give our warmest round of applause to welcome Chairman Rivers and Miss Stella Rivers, the host shouted excitedly. The hall erupted in thunderous applause. An elevator descended from the top floor, and as the doors opened, Walter Rivers stepped out first, the young woman holding his arm finally revealed to the world. Everyone looked on with great anticipation. The moment they saw Stella Rivers, their expressions became a sight to behold. Aidan's reaction was the most pronounced. He couldn't stop a curse from escaping under his breath. Damn, where did they find this ugly duckling? Though Stella wore a bespoke gown from a major designer, it couldn't hide her rustic air. Her skin was dark and covered in freckles, and a pair of large, hideous black-framed glasses sat on her face. Paired with a magnificent dress that was completely at odds with her demeanor, she was uniquely unattractive. It might have been passable if she carried herself with grace, but her face was frozen in an awkward, timid smile. She shrank behind her grandfather, looking like she'd never seen such a grand affair. Julian and Dylan looked over, their expressions darkening even further. After a brief, stunned silence, the room quickly filled with noise again. No matter how much they looked down on this plain, rustic girl, she was still Walter Rivers' granddaughter, the future heir to the Rivers' fortune. Everyone plastered on their most enthusiastic smiles and began to shower her with over-the-top compliments, as if they were blind. After a short round of greetings, Walter led Stella over to the 3 Blackwood brothers. "Stella, let me introduce you. These are your Grandpa Blackwood's 3 grandsons, Julian, Dylan, and Aidan." Julian and Dylan stood up first, offering polite, well-mannered smiles. They nodded at Stella. "A pleasure to meet you, Miss Rivers." "Aidan," Julian said, his voice dropping as he glanced down at his younger brother. Aidan reluctantly got to his feet. For the sake of the 2 families' reputations, he mumbled a quick greeting. "Hello." Stella looked at the 3 boys, who were around her age, and put on a deliberately shy smile. The sight of it on her freckled face made Aidan shudder. As if she didn't notice, or perhaps to intentionally unnerve him, she uttered a sentence that left all 3 of them speechless. "Grandfather, are they the ones you said would be engaged to me?" Chapter 2. Walter Rivers chuckled. "That's right. There's a marriage agreement between you and the Blackwood family." Aidan couldn't help but shudder again. No one saw the triumphant smile that flashed across Stella's face at his reaction. They only saw her ask with a look of fawning concern, "What's wrong with this handsome young man?" Aidan didn't dare look at her again. I'm drunk," Walter immediately chimed in with a grin. "Perfect. The 3 of you come inside with me. I have something to discuss with you." The brothers reluctantly followed him into the mansion's inner hall. Walter was then pulled away by another guest, leaving the four of them alone in the vast living room, each lost in their own thoughts. A servant served tea. Dylan picked up a cup and took a delicate sip, about to praise its quality when he saw Stella gulp hers down like it was plain water. She even smacked her lips and wiped her mouth, completely wasting the top-grade Maofeng tea. He couldn't help but frown, his disdain for her deepening. Meanwhile, Stella observed Julian, the most composed of the three brothers, thinking to herself that the eldest son was indeed better at hiding his emotions. Aiden happened to catch the covetous look the ugly girl was giving his older brother, and alarm bells went off in his head. "Oh, so you're ugly, but you dream big, huh? My brother is a god among men. What makes a country bumpkin like you think you're worthy of him?" He shot her a furious glare, only to receive a shy smile from Stella's plain, freckled face. Aiden felt like he was about to vomit up last night's dinner. Just as Dylan and Aiden were squirming, desperate to escape the same room as this off-putting hick, the main door suddenly opened. Assuming it was Walter returning, everyone turned, including Stella. The man who entered was nearly 6'3", dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. He exuded a deep, restrained aura of power and nobility. His eyes were as dark and profound as ink, seemingly impossible to read. At the sight of him, the previously impatient Blackwood brothers shot to their feet, their expressions a mixture of respect, surprise, and even a hint of fear. Stella guessed he was someone important. A mischievous glint appeared in her eyes, and before anyone could react, she darted forward and, with a star-struck expression, placed her hands on his abs. "Wow, who is this handsome guy? He's so hot. Oh my God, and so many abs." The sight of a dark, freckled face with a lecherous grin made Aiden feel sick. But more than wanting to vomit, he wanted to murder this country bumpkin on the spot. Did she have a death wish? Even if she did, she didn't have to drag him down with her. Did she have any idea who this was? This was Ethan Blackwood, the man feared throughout Lockwood City as the Reaper. Ethan looked down at the woman who was currently groping him. While she fondled his abs with a drooling expression, she looked up at him with sparkling eyes and asked, "Handsome, are you also one of the fiancés my grandfather picked for me?" The three brothers inside were grinding their teeth so hard they could have drawn blood. Yet Ethan showed no sign of disgust. He simply grabbed her wandering hands and offered a slight smile. "I'm not your fiancé. According to our family seniority, you should call me youngest uncle." Just then, Walter walked in. Ethan released Stella's hands and turned to greet him. Walter smiled back. "Ethan, you're here too? Stella, this is Julian and the other's youngest uncle. You can call him that as well." Stella looked up, her face still fixed in that signature star-struck expression. "Youngest uncle? Is he also a candidate to be my fiancé?" Walter froze for a second, then burst out laughing. "Ha ha ha, Stella, stop joking." Stella was about to say more when she noticed that not only was Ethan not angry, but he was sizing her up with amusement in his eyes. She froze. In the next second, Walter was already addressing the Blackwood brothers. "I'm sure your grandfather has told you. Starting next week, Stella will be attending Imperial High with you all. She is my only granddaughter, so you must take good care of her." Aiden looked like he was attending a funeral. Dylan remained silent. Only Julian responded in his usual calm and polite tone, "We will, Grandpa Rivers." Hearing his reply, Stella deliberately shot him a shy, timid look, which made Dylan and Aiden roll their eyes in disgust. She smirked inwardly, but as she turned her head, she caught Ethan's gaze sweeping over her, as if he had seen through all her little tricks. She paused, finally toning down her expression. After the Blackwoods left, Walter tentatively asked, "Stella, dear, of the three Blackwood brothers, who made the best impression on you?" Stella scoffed internally. None of them had made a good impression. Aiden was naive and malicious, Dylan was aloof and cold, and Julian was polite but distant. The only one who was even remotely interesting was that man named Ethan Blackwood. Chapter 3. Night fell. The 3 days of revelry at the mansion faded away, and a quiet evening breeze drifted through the open window. Dressed in a white nightgown, Stella gazed into the distance. Now, with her glasses off and the day's crude, foolish, and rustic disguise washed away, the dark, freckled face was gone. In its place was a face stunning enough to captivate anyone. Her eyes remained fixed in a certain direction, her expression complex. It had been a month since she arrived here. She wondered how Finn and the others were doing. As she was thinking, the laptop that had been on beside her beeped twice. She quickly looked over and saw a message from Finn. "Little fish eats shrimp, Boss S. How are things in Lockwood City? No one's giving you trouble, right?" Stella smiled and typed back. "The person who can give your boss trouble hasn't been born yet. Little fish eats shrimp. Fist bump emoji. My boss is the best SU. How about you guys? Are those people still bothering you? Little fish eats shrimp. No, you're gone, so they can't find any evidence. There's nothing they can do to us. Little fish eats shrimp. Boss S. There's a program that the third has been trying to crack for ages. We need your help, SU. Send it over. I'll help you." Within 3 seconds, a link appeared. Just as Stella was about to click it, she remembered something. She stared at the computer, then typed a few more words into the chat box. "SU, I'll help you in the morning. Little fish eats shrimp. Okay. Get some rest, Boss S. We're planning to come back to Lockwood City next month." After ending the chat, Stella sat quietly, reflecting on the past month. She had hidden herself well during this time. Those people shouldn't have found her. She then thought of the 4 Blackwood men. She wondered if their appearance in her life would be a blessing or a curse. At 6 a.m, a small gap opened in the gate of the Rivers villa, and a slender figure slipped out. Stella was dressed casually in a black hoodie and gray sweatpants, the hood pulled loosely over her head. She walked quickly down the street. The sky was still dark. As she walked, she suddenly saw a familiar figure approaching. Looking closer, she realized it was Ethan Blackwood from the party. Remembering Ethan's all-seeing gaze from yesterday, she panicked. She immediately covered the lower half of her face with her hand, pulled her hood down further, and bowed her head low. "Crap, I was too lazy to put on makeup this early of all people. Why did I have to run into Ethan Blackwood?" Ethan was wearing a black tank top and shorts, a thin layer of sweat glistening on his perfectly sculpted muscles. He was clearly just returning from a run when he saw the person up ahead. He gave her a rare second glance, his gaze sharpening. Stella, with her face covered and head down, tried to hurry past him. But as fate would have it, her vision was obscured, and as they passed each other, she accidentally bumped into him. Her heart nearly stopped. In a rough, disguised voice, she quickly muttered, "Sorry," and without a second thought for how suspicious she looked, she strode away without looking back. Ethan stopped in his tracks, turning to watch her retreating back, his deep eyes narrowing. He was sure he didn't know this person, but there was an inexplicable sense of familiarity, and he could feel that this person was very afraid of him. After walking for nearly half a mile, Stella finally felt safe enough to lower her hand and push back her hood, her waterfall of long hair damp with sweat. Her undisguised face was finally exposed to the air. Without the darkened skin, dense freckles, and glasses, it was a flawless, exquisitely beautiful face. Her features were delicate, with large, expressive eyes, a high-bridged nose, and lips that were naturally ruby red. A nervous expression flickered across her face as she hoped she hadn't been discovered. Although her real appearance was a world away from how she looked yesterday, and no one could possibly connect the two, Stella had a nagging feeling. She had a gut instinct that if Ethan Blackwood saw her true face, it would mean a lot of trouble. Chapter 4. After resting for a moment, she put her hood back on and continued on her way. She expertly navigated to a somewhat dilapidated residential building, climbing all the way to the 6th-floor rooftop. From a hidden corner, she retrieved a black bag. Seeing the familiar tools inside, Stella's lips curved into a smile. This was her encrypted laptop. No one in the world, except for her, could crack its IP address. Only when using it did she feel completely secure. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, she booted it up and opened the link Finn had sent her yesterday. Her hands flew across the keyboard with incredible speed, her expression intensely focused. She remained on the rooftop until the sun was high in the sky. After typing the final command, she said with satisfaction, "Done." She rubbed her slightly sore arms, packed the laptop into her bag, and leisurely headed downstairs. Just then her phone rang. It was Finn. "What's up?" "It's bad. Boss S. Something of ours was mistakenly sent back to the country. It might be auctioned off today. You need to get to the auction house and retrieve it. If it falls into someone else's hands, we'll be completely exposed." Hearing this, Stella's expression immediately turned serious. "Got it." After hanging up, she followed the information Finn gave her and rushed to the auction house, arriving just in time to enter. This was Lockwood City's triennial charity auction, and the attendees were either socialites and wealthy ladies or business tycoons. Dressed in a simple sweatsuit, Stella, despite her stunning looks, didn't appear wealthy. As soon as she entered, she drew disdainful glances. She paid them no mind, found a seat in a corner, and sat down. A few minutes later, a commotion rippled through the hall. It seemed a major figure had arrived. The same wealthy individuals who had been looking down their noses just moments before now stood up, their faces beaming with sycophantic smiles as they tried to curry favor. Only Stella remained lazily seated, not even bothering to look up. As soon as Ethan Blackwood entered, he spotted the sweatsuit he had seen that morning. He raised an eyebrow with a slight smile and, bypassing everyone else, walked directly to the empty seat beside Stella. It wasn't until a powerful, oppressive presence settled next to her that Stella frowned and turned her head. Ethan happened to turn his head at the same moment. When their eyes met, both of them froze for an instant. Stella was screaming internally. "What is my luck today? How did I run into him here too?" All that hiding this morning was for nothing. As for Ethan, he was momentarily stunned upon seeing her face clearly. So it's such a breathtaking face. Given how she had hidden herself that morning, he had almost thought she was shockingly ugly. A moment of silence passed between them. Both maintaining cool expressions, they quickly turned away from each other. The auction began. The first item was a necklace designed by a famous international designer with a starting bid of $40,000. Bids quickly followed, but neither Stella nor Ethan raised their paddles. In fact, Stella grew so bored listening that she started to feel drowsy. For the first 6 items, both remained silent. Then, the auctioneer began to introduce the 7th piece. Next up for auction is the painting Sunset by the British artist Carl. The starting bid is $300,000. Stella stared at the painting on the stage, knowing this was what Finn had been talking about. Just as she was about to raise her paddle, someone beat her to it. $350,000. It was Ethan's assistant who spoke. Knowing it was something Ethan wanted, no one else in the auction hall dared to bid. Just before the hammer fell, a clear, young voice rang out, $400,000. Chapter 5. Almost every eye in the room instantly turned to her, but Stella seemed oblivious, ignoring the scrutinizing gaze from the man beside her. Ethan smiled faintly, casually twisting the ring on his index finger. His assistant quickly raised the bid, $450,000. Stella immediately followed. $500,000, $700,000, $800,000, $900,000, $1 million. The other attendees held their breath, watching this beautifully dressed but seemingly poor young woman go head-to-head with Ethan Blackwood. The two bid against each other countless times, eventually driving the price up to a staggering 20 times its original value. $7 million. Stella raised her paddle, her expression impassive, as if the number meant nothing to her. The assistant looked to his boss, unsure if he should continue. He saw Ethan give a slight signal. The assistant understood at once and lowered his paddle. 3 seconds later, the auctioneer's hammer fell. $7 million sold. Ethan turned to her, seemingly not angry at all. "Congratulations," Stella smiled. "Thank you for letting me have it." After the auction ended, Stella took the painting and unceremoniously stuffed it into her backpack. Just as she was about to leave, she saw Ethan, followed by his assistant and bodyguards, walking towards her. "Hold on." Stella sensed he was not coming with good intentions and watched him warily. Ethan, however, maintained his unreadable expression. $7 million for a painting worth only $300,000. It seems this item is very important to you. Sensing the hidden meaning in his words, Stella didn't back down. "I just like it. You gave up because you didn't like it enough." "No," he replied flatly. "I just didn't think it was worth it. I'm a businessman, I don't make losing deals." The item wasn't worth a higher price, but he was determined to have it. He cut to the chase. 2 choices. 1, I give you back the $7 million and the painting is mine. 2, you get neither the painting nor the money. Ethan's dark eyes grew deeper, making Stella understand why he was known as the Reaper. She sneered. "I choose neither. What are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to take it by force." As soon as the words left his mouth, the bodyguards behind him lunged at Stella, but she was too fast. She dodged them swiftly and ran out of the hall. Once outside, she knew Ethan wouldn't give up so easily. She hailed a taxi, kicked the driver out, and jumped into the driver's seat, speeding away. Ethan, who had followed her out, saw her race off and immediately got into his own car to give chase. The two vehicles quickly vanished at the intersection. Ethan tailed Stella's car closely. A novel sense of excitement rose within him. The girl seemed to have awakened his desire for conquest, making him, a man who usually disdained everything, want to catch her and find out just who she was. However, Stella's driving skills were clearly on par with his. Even in an ordinary taxi, she drove at incredible speeds, like a whirlwind. Every time Ethan was about to overtake her, she would shoot forward like the wind. Finally, Stella saw a turn. She made a sudden, sharp turn, and by the time Ethan caught up, he found himself on a major road teeming with traffic. It was impossible to tell which ordinary taxi was hers. Ethan stopped, his expression grim, but a faint smile played on his lips. His interest in her had not diminished, it had grown. A woman who had bested him twice in a row, first at the auction and now in a car chase. Interesting. Meanwhile, Stella, having shaken him off, quickly drove to a secluded spot, got out, and took another taxi back to the Rivers estate, backpack in tow. She tiptoed back to her room, hid the painting, and let out a sigh of relief. She had actually enjoyed the thrill of the chase and meeting her match, but thinking of the man's menacing eyes, she snorted. This Ethan Blackwood was a real handful. Chapter 6. For the next 2 days, she stayed quietly at home. Finally, the first day of school arrived. She woke up early. The Rivers family had countless luxury cars and drivers, but Walter insisted she go to school with the 3 Blackwood brothers every day. He called it more lively and safer with more people. Stella sighed. Fortunately, the Blackwood villa was just next door. Dressed in her school uniform, she stood at the gate waiting for the car. Since it was the first day, Walter even came out to see her off. Stella, if anyone bullies you at school, you must tell me. I know, grandfather. You can also have Julian and the others stand up for you. They'd be more likely to cheer on the bullies, Stella thought. Just then, a stretched Lincoln pulled up. She mentally rolled her eyes. Did these rich kids have to be so ostentatious just to go to school? The car door opened, and the 3 Blackwood brothers greeted Walter. Stella put on an eager expression and quickly got into the car. Seeing her eagerness, Aiden knew she had never been in such a nice car before. Once the car was moving, he sneered, "What a popper!" Stella was sitting in the front row, next to Julian, so she heard Aiden's remark. She turned to him with a worried look. "Brother Aiden, what if someone bullies me when I get to school?" Her pitiful act made Aiden frown. "What's it to me? But grandfather told you all to take care of me." Wow, she even knows how to make threats. Aiden wanted to curse at the sight of her ugly face, but Julian, sitting in front, spoke up coolly, "No one will bully you." Stella looked at Julian's profile with a smitten expression. "Really? Brother Julian, will you protect me?" Julian didn't even look at her, a flicker of annoyance passing through him. "You are the heir to the Rivers family. At Imperial High, no one would dare to bully you." "So you're saying if I wasn't grandfather's granddaughter, everyone would bully me?" she retorted. Dylan, the second brother who had been silent all along, scoffed. "You could try it and see." "That's exactly what I wanted." Stella put on a sad, defeated expression. "Fine, I'll attend school as a regular person then. I believe that even so, everyone will still like me." Dylan snorted disdainfully, and Aiden was almost impressed by her audacity. Only Julian frowned and asked, "Are you sure?" Stella nodded. "Stop the car in front of the school and let me out." Although Julian was frowning, he didn't object. In his mind, taking care of her was a task assigned by his family. If she insisted on hiding her identity and courting disaster, he had no objection to her self-destructive behavior. The car stopped, and she got out and walked towards the school. Aiden and Dylan watched her go, somewhat dumbfounded that she had actually gone through with it. Julian watched her coolly, his eyes cold. Foolish. As she walked into Imperial High, she drew countless stares. Finally, she found her classroom. Senior Class A. As she entered, the noisy classroom fell silent for a few seconds, then erupted in laughter. A few boys even stood on their desks, pointing and jeering at her. "Whoa, she's so ugly, where did this country bumpkin come from? Look at her glasses, my grandpa's doorman wouldn't even wear those. I'm dying, look at her face." Stella paid them no mind. She scanned the room and walked towards the only empty seat. Chapter 7. Just as she was about to sit down, the class beauty, Melanie Finch, blocked her way. She looked at Stella with disgust. "You can't sit here. How dare this ugly woman think of sitting next to Julian Blackwood?" That's right, the empty seat was next to Julian. Stella didn't back down. She dropped her backpack onto the chair and retorted, "Why not?" "Because you can't, you're so ugly. What right do you have to sit here?" Stella laughed, finding the argument absurd. "And what if I insist?" Even though she was hideously freckled, she dared to speak to her like that. Melanie's anger flared, and she reached out to grab her. "You're not worthy," but she was no match for Stella. With a light push, the usually revered class beauty fell flat on her bottom. Now the boys in the class were furious. "Ugly girl, how dare you push Melanie? Yeah, and you dream of sitting next to Julian Blackwood. In your dreams, Julian Blackwood is first in our grade. The person next to him should at least be second in the grade." Stella smiled nonchalantly and sat down calmly. She looked at the class beauty, who had just been helped up and was now glaring at her with hatred. "So if I get second in the grade, I can sit here?" Melanie scoffed. This plain, ugly country bumpkin had the nerve to say she could get second place at Imperial High on her first day. Seriously, had she even heard of Imperial High? Imperial High was the best private high school in the country. It was filled with geniuses and top students. Even she, with all her hard work, could only manage to rank in the 20s or 30s. She held her head high. "At the entrance exams next week, if you can get second in the grade, I'll admit you can sit here. If you can't," she pointed to the trash can at the back of the classroom, "you'll sit there." "Deal," Stella replied calmly, infuriating Melanie, who gritted her teeth. By the time Julian and Dylan walked in, the classroom had settled down. When Julian saw Stella sitting next to him, his eyes flickered, but he said nothing. He calmly put down his backpack and sat down. Stella, however, noticed Aiden was missing and couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "Where's Aiden?" Julian didn't stop what he was doing. "He's in Class F. He had once been in Class A, but due to his poor grades and disruptive behavior, his grandfather had angrily sent him to Class F." Stella nodded in understanding. Meanwhile, Melanie had been secretly watching Julian. Seeing this new country, bumpkin strike up a conversation with him on the first day filled her with rage and intensified her hatred. After the first class, Julian went out for a drink of water. Melanie walked past Stella's desk, her eyes blazing with jealousy. "Don't get cocky." Stella returned a smile, exuding a confidence that was at odds with her homely appearance. Dylan saw the exchange and frowned slightly, but said nothing. Somehow, Julian found out about her bet with Melanie. That day after school, as the car pulled up to the river's gate and she was about to get out, Julian spoke to her for the first time on his own initiative. "If you want to sit next to me, you don't have to do all this." Stella paused in her motion of getting out. She glanced at Julian's expressionless face and knew he didn't believe for a second that she could get second place. She smiled slightly, "But I already made a promise to Melanie. A promise is a promise." With that, she got out of the car with a flourish. Chapter 8. Inside the car, Aiden said dismissively, "Listen to her brag. Does she think Imperial High is like her school back in the country?" Julian stared at her departing back, an inexplicable feeling that this girl was completely confident in her victory. As soon as she entered the house, Stella saw Ethan Blackwood sitting in the living room with her grandfather. Remembering the events of the past few days, she felt a bit awkward and tried to walk past quietly. But Walter spotted her and immediately called her over to sit. "Stella, first day at Imperial High. How was it?" Stella sat down, and as Ethan's gaze fell on her, she deliberately put on that shy, affected smile again. "It was all good, grandfather." That's good, that's good." Ethan watched Stella's expression with interest, recalling their first meeting. Although she had shamelessly flirted with him, he hadn't missed the cunning glint in her eyes then, or later when she deliberately scared Aiden. Even with the large, black-framed glasses, he had sensed it. This Miss Rivers was interesting. Suddenly, he felt that Stella seemed somewhat familiar. Though her features were plain, her figure was slender and upright, and she gave him a very familiar feeling. Stella sensed Ethan's probing gaze and met his eyes directly. "There's no way he can recognize me, can he?" "Stella's previous parents in the country, what did they do?" he asked. "They were simple farmers. They are your adoptive parents, after all. Don't you want to bring them to Lockwood City?" Stella smiled, answering smoothly, They wouldn't be comfortable with life here. They prefer their hometown. Ethan nodded and asked no more questions. He had a feeling that this Stella was not as simple as she appeared. After sitting for a while, Stella went back to her room. She took out her homework, her thoughts turning to her bet with Melanie. Second in the grade? She sneered. She didn't even consider Julian, the top student, a worthy opponent. The entrance exam was a week after school started. Melanie noticed that the new girl, Stella, was incredibly arrogant. After boasting that she would get second place, she hardly seemed to be studying at all. For 3 consecutive days, she dozed off during class and slept during breaks, showing no sense of urgency about the upcoming exam. Even Julian couldn't help but glance at her. When the bell rang for the end of class, Stella immediately put her head down on the desk to sleep, but she felt a nudge on her elbow. She opened her eyes to see Julian's cool profile, a look of confusion on her face. Julian didn't look up. The exam is in 2 days. So, he turned his head, his eyes filled with disbelief. You're not going to study? Stella laughed, looking at the advanced finance book in his hands. You're not studying either, are you? Oh, so he, the guaranteed top student, doesn't need to study, but I, the country bumpkin, must, or else I'll end up sitting by the trash can. Is that it? Seeing her so obstinate, Julian stopped talking and went back to his book. Stella closed her eyes and went back to sleep. She had recently brought her laptop back to the Rivers house and had been forced by that fiend Finn to help them crack one thing after another every night. She was dead tired. Chapter 9. On the day of the entrance exam. In the morning, Stella stood at the gate, still looking exhausted, waiting for the car. But it wasn't the usual stretched Lincoln that pulled up. It was another luxury car. Stella looked over, puzzled. The driver's side window rolled down, revealing Ethan Blackwood's handsome face. Get in, I'll give you all a ride, it's on my way. Stella steeled herself and walked over. The back seat was already full, leaving only the front passenger seat empty. Clearly, the young masters of the Blackwood family had no desire to sit next to their reaper uncle. Stella resigned herself to her fate and bravely took the seat. I hear you have exams today. Good luck, he said, his voice deep and magnetic. Stella smiled. Thank you, uncle, I'll do my best. From the back seat, Aiden's sarcastic voice piped up. Of course she has to do her best. Someone boasted she was going to get second in the grade. That's a pretty big brag. Ethan was taken aback and glanced at Stella, but her face showed no embarrassment or shame. She just smiled faintly, seemingly uninterested in refuting the claim. Before getting out of the car, she tried to unbuckle her seatbelt, but for some reason, it was stuck. Just as she was getting frustrated, a long, well-defined hand reached over from the side. Ethan leaned over slightly, his expression neutral, and with a simple flick of his wrist, he easily unbuckled it and retracted his hand. Thanks, you're welcome, second place. When the results are out, your uncle will give you a reward. Stella, why do I feel like he's provoking me? She glanced at Ethan, then got out of the car. In the exam room, Stella looked at the questions and scoffed. Back when she was learning hacking, she had done Harvard's entrance exam for fun. While these questions were difficult, it was just an entrance exam. There wouldn't be any trick questions. She picked up her pen and started writing furiously. After finishing, she felt sleepy and rested her head on the desk. It was the same for all the exams. The first half was for answering questions, the second half for sleeping. After the exams, back in the classroom, Melanie saw her exhausted face and assumed the questions had been too hard for her. She mocked, Imperial High has a way of teaching overconfident people a lesson. Stella ignored her. She was really tired. She rolled her eyes and laid her head on the desk to sleep. Melanie stomped her foot in frustration. The results would be out in 2 days. Just you wait. On the day the results were posted, nearly the entire grade was crowded around the results board, everyone wearing expressions of disbelief. Especially Melanie. When she saw the ranking next to Stella's name, she had to rub her eyes. It was first in the grade. Her total score was even 1 point higher than Julian Blackwood's. How was that possible? She was just a country bumpkin. How dare she steal Julian's spot? Back in the classroom, a group of students had already surrounded Stella, praising her for defeating Julian on her first try. Melanie was filled with disgust, but she had to admit that Stella had won. There was nothing she could do. Stella looked at her with a smile, a silent challenge. Melanie gritted her teeth and walked over. You got lucky this time. Say whatever you want. Seeing her freckled face, Melanie had another idea. She sneered, so what if you have good grades? The school's opening banquet is next Friday. Do you dare to come? Why wouldn't I? Fine, we'll see whose date is more impressive. Whoever wins, I'll avoid you whenever I see you from now on. Okay, Melanie stormed off, grinding her teeth. When Julian returned to the classroom, the way he looked at Stella had clearly changed. He couldn't deny that the result had surprised him. Stella smiled brightly. Sorry about that for taking your spot. He sat down, his expression unchanging, his voice still cool. A win is a win. Stella gave a non-committal shrug and went back to sleep. Chapter 10. As Friday approached, the class gossip spread the news. Melanie had invited Aiden Blackwood to be her date. The two who disliked Stella had hit it off immediately. Everyone was waiting to see Stella make a fool of herself. She was ugly and not from a prominent family. She would never find a better date than Aiden. She was bound to lose this contest. Julian, however, didn't think so. He was convinced Stella would eventually swallow her pride and ask him for help. He had even prepared himself to agree. But by Thursday, Stella had made no move. Even he was surprised. She seemed completely unfazed. When they went home from school on Thursday, she didn't ask him for help. Julian's expression darkened, his emotions unreadable. The next day, at the banquet, Melanie saw her walk into the hall alone and gloated. Don't tell me you couldn't find a date? Laughter and mockery filled the air around them. People jeered at her for being overconfident, for being ugly and poor, yet daring to attend a banquet for Imperial High's elite circle. But Stella just smiled faintly. He'll be here soon. Melanie scoffed, assuming she was just making someone up because she couldn't find a date. And what if he never shows up? Am I supposed to wait with you all night? But in the next second, a gasp rippled through the entrance. Hearing the commotion, Stella knew who it was. He's here. Everyone looked towards the entrance. When they saw the person who had arrived, they froze, especially Aiden. This woman had invited his youngest uncle Ethan Blackwood, looking elegant in a white suit, walked over to Stella. Sorry, I'm late. It wasn't just the others. Even Julian and Dylan, who had been watching from the side, were stunned. She had actually managed to invite Ethan. Ethan himself felt a bit helpless. He had casually said she would get a reward if she placed second, but she had ended up placing first. Her condition was that he accompany her to the opening banquet. A man of his word, especially to this young girl, Ethan had come. Stella naturally linked her arm with Ethan's and smiled at Melanie. So, what do you think? Did you win or did I? Melanie's face was a grimace. Who in Lockwood City didn't know the youngest master of the Blackwood family? She wouldn't dare make a scene in front of Ethan. She could only turn red with suppressed anger and reluctantly say, "You win." Stella nodded in satisfaction and led Ethan away. She didn't notice the complex expression in Ethan's eyes. So familiar. The scent when she got close, the confident and calm tone. Lately, Ethan often found himself thinking of that girl's sharp skills and striking eyes. And now, from this completely different-looking Stella, he sensed the exact same aura. Stella was oblivious. She excused herself to go to the restroom. Melanie saw this and gave her friends a look. They all followed Stella into the restroom. After closing the stall door, Stella sensed something was wrong. But just as she was about to leave, a bucket of cold water was dumped on her from above, drenching her completely. Then she heard the sound of several people running away in a panic. Her gown was soaked through. But worse, her makeup was ruined. There were so many people outside, including all the Blackwoods. Was she going to have her cover blown in front of everyone? Confirming the restroom was empty, Stella cautiously ran out. Fortunately, there was a dressing room right next door filled with performance costumes. She chose a relatively decent one to change into. When she looked in the mirror, her face was indeed a mess. She had no choice but to use a tissue to wipe it clean, slowly revealing her true face. When Stella reappeared in the banquet hall, she drew a lot of attention. Because she was wearing a butterfly mask, she was incredibly relieved. If she hadn't found the mask in the dressing room, she would have been stuck in there all day. When Ethan saw her, he asked, "What happened?" Stella replied, "I had an allergic reaction. A rash broke out." Nearby, Melanie overheard that she had a rash and smirked. She was already ugly. A rash would make her even more disgusting. She was determined to make this country bumpkin publicly humiliated, to make Ethan regret being her date. With that, she hatched another plan. During the dance, she deliberately stood next to Stella. Aiden was getting impatient. He didn't want to be too close to Ethan. Stella pretended to dance clumsily, stepping on Ethan's feet 9 times out of 10. Ethan watched her with an amused smile, seeing through her little act. He looked down and happened to see Stella's eyes, the only part of her face that was visible. Those clear, watery eyes were unmistakably. Before he could finish his thought, the girl next to them suddenly screamed and fell towards Stella. Ethan instinctively shielded Stella, but couldn't stop Melanie's hand. She snatched at the mask's strap. Snap! The mask fell to the floor. Her waterfall of hair cascaded over her slender shoulders. The entire banquet hall fell into a long, stunned silence. Chapter 11. Stella's heart pounded like a drum. She could feel every eye in the room fixed on her. Melanie had been gloating internally. Now this country bumpkin will be humiliated in public, but when she looked up and saw the girl's unveiled face, she froze completely. It wasn't just her. Almost the entire hall was stunned. Julian, Dylan, and Aiden stared at Stella's face in disbelief. Was this the same dark-skinned, freckle-faced, ugly girl they remembered? Only Ethan remained surprised for a mere 2 seconds before a look of "I knew it" crossed his face. He smirked. "Hello again, little fox." Stella Rivers?" Melanie's voice was incredulous. How could this beautiful, fairy-like girl be Stella Rivers? With all eyes on her, the hand Ethan had on her waist slowly loosened. He watched her with a playful look, seemingly with no intention of helping her out of this jam. She quickly composed herself. Noticing the different dress she was wearing, she calmed down and a smile touched her lips. "I'm not Stella Rivers, what?" The entire hall was shocked once again. Stella turned to Ethan, who was watching her with deep, knowing eyes, and gave him a charming smile. "I'm a friend of Stella's. She was drenched with water in the restroom just now and didn't want so many people to see her in such a state, so she asked me to help her finish the banquet. Unfortunately, I failed to complete that task for her." The excuse wasn't perfect, but this face was a world away from Stella Rivers. Although some were skeptical, they found it hard to believe that the person standing before them could be Stella. As Stella's #1 hater, Aiden was the first to accept her explanation. "That's what I thought. It's not like that woman could get plastic surgery in the bathroom." Hearing Aiden say this, more and more people began to agree, and soon, everyone accepted her story. Stella let out a quiet sigh of relief, only to see Ethan staring at her. Oops. She suddenly remembered that while others might not recognize this face, Ethan certainly did. She had taken that $7 million painting right in front of him. Sure enough, Ethan slowly approached her. Towering over her, he bent his head slightly, his voice low and slow. "Are you really not Stella?" Although it was a question, there was no hint of doubt in his tone, as if he already knew the answer. Though she didn't know if he would believe her, Stella stuck to her story. "I'm not." Ethan seemed to believe her. He nodded and then smiled again. "Since you're here, why not share a dance with me before you go?" Stella looked at him cautiously. Remembering how he had chased her in his car that day, she suddenly felt like she had walked right into the wolf's den. But the words had already been spoken. Since she was here to help Stella finish the banquet, she naturally had to finish the dance. The small commotion quickly died down, and many people went back to their own business. Many of the boys were intrigued by this new, beautiful face, but with Ethan Blackwood standing by her side, no one dared to approach her. Melanie watched as the strange girl captured everyone's attention, her heart burning with jealousy. She regretted pulling off the mask to humiliate her. She had ended up making her the star of the show. Stella had no time to think about what others were thinking. She was focused on dancing with Ethan. As Stella, she had deliberately danced chaotically, stepping on Ethan's feet repeatedly. But as this other person, Stella revealed her true skill. She danced exquisitely, which would only help convince others that she and Stella were not the same person. Chapter 12. "So you can dance this well," Ethan said, a smile in his voice as he looked at her. One hand rested lightly on her waist, the other held hers, as he gazed at the girl close to him. Stella looked up, pretending not to understand. "I'm not very good, please don't mind me." Ethan nodded. "Much better than before." His tone was teasing, his eyes seeming to see right through her. Stella didn't reply. She knew that the more she said, the more she might slip up. She simply finished the dance in silence. As soon as it was over, she wanted to leave. Unexpectedly, Ethan didn't stop her. He just watched quietly as she walked out of the banquet hall. In another corner of the hall, Julian had been observing everything: the sudden appearance of the strange girl and her flimsy excuse. A wave of unease rippled through Julian's usually calm heart. Is that person really not Stella Rivers? After leaving, Stella walked quickly towards the school gate. She sighed to herself about how unlucky her day had been, but she had no idea that the worst was yet to come. When she reached the school gate, she saw Ethan's top-of-the-line luxury car parked right in front. And the man who had just been dancing with her inside was now sitting in the car, watching her with a relaxed expression. Stella understood. "Oh, you scoundrel. No wonder you let me go so easily. You were waiting for me here." Seeing her stop, Ethan spoke. "Since you're Stella's friend, it's only right that I give you a ride. Get in." When she hesitated, his voice unconsciously took on a tone of authority, one that came from years of being in power. "Don't worry, you don't have anything for me to steal today." He was alluding to their fight over the painting. His calm and composed demeanor irked Stella. "Get in the car? Fine, what's the big deal? It's not like you're going to eat me." She strode forward, opened the back door, and sat down. After buckling her seatbelt, she said politely, "Well, thank you, Uncle." The man raised an eyebrow. "Uncle?" Stella replied naturally. "Stella calls you Uncle. I'm her friend, so of course I call you Uncle too." Ethan nodded, seemingly accepting the title, and then told the driver to go. "Where do you live?" Stella froze, then quickly rattled off the name of a residential complex, without giving a unit number or any other details. She said formally, "Just drop me off at the entrance of the complex, Uncle." Ethan didn't press further, simply instructing the driver to take her there first. Silence filled the car. Both sat in the back without speaking. Just as Stella was starting to feel awkward, Ethan broke the silence. "You're a good driver." Knowing he was referring to that day, Stella felt a surge of anger. She had never met someone so unreasonable. She had won the painting fair and square, yet this man had tried to take it by force. It showed just how lawless he usually was. She said deliberately, "Your driving skills aren't bad either, Uncle, but your moral compass, not so much." Chapter 13, Moral Compass? Ethan raised an eyebrow. That was a new one. This young lady was probably the only person who dared to say such a thing to his face. Stella continued, unafraid, "Even if you're the king of Lockwood City, you can't just snatch things out of people's hands, can you?" Stella herself didn't sense the danger, but the driver in the front was visibly trembling. His lips quivered as he glanced at Mr. Blackwood in the rearview mirror, thinking, "Young lady, if you have a death wish, don't drag me down with you." But he didn't see Mr. Blackwood's usual cold, ruthless expression. Instead, there seemed to be a faint, playful smile at the corner of his eyes. The driver shivered and quickly looked away, focusing on the road. "That painting is useless to you. If you like Carl's work, I can find all his other pieces for you." "No, thank you. I just like that particular painting," Stella replied immediately. Ethan suddenly turned to look at her, his eyes unreadable. "Spending $7 million on a painting, I suspect it's more than just liking it." Stella smirked inwardly. "Finally showing your true colors. You've been probing me all this time just to see if I know the painting's secret, haven't you?" Grandma isn't falling for it. She blinked her eyes, putting on an incredibly innocent expression. "Huh, what else could it be besides liking it? Uncle, you wanted that painting so badly. Was it for some other reason?" Caught off guard by her counter-question, Ethan was momentarily stunned. But then he saw her eyes curve into crescents, sparkling with a cunning glint. She was smiling like a fox. This kid was truly something else. He leaned in closer, his voice low and husky, with a hint of intimacy. "Kid, holding onto that thing won't do you any good." Just as he finished speaking, the driver hit the brakes, stopping the car at the entrance of the residential complex Stella had named. She glanced outside, then fearlessly met Ethan's gaze. "Whether it does me any good or not is not for you to decide." With that, she turned, opened the door, and left, walking into the complex as if she lived there. Ethan watched her back until she completely disappeared from sight, then instructed the driver to leave. Once the car was far away, Stella emerged from the complex. Thinking about Ethan's cryptic words, she began to wonder what secret the painting held. Unfortunately, that fool Finn thought it was too risky to tell her over the phone and insisted on waiting until they met in Lockwood City. But why did Ethan want that painting so badly? Could it be that he also knew the secret? As far as she knew, the secret in the painting was related to the identities of her crew. What did that have to do with the Blackwood family? There were too many puzzles. Lost in thought, Stella walked back to the Rivers estate. She was extremely cautious, half expecting Ethan to be waiting outside to catch her in the act. She deliberately waited until it was dark and then climbed over the back wall. But as she balanced on top of the wall, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her from behind. She crouched on the wall, carefully scanning her surroundings. Seeing no one, she finally jumped down. And just after she jumped, a car pulled out from a grove of trees a few dozen yards away, turned around, and drove off. Chapter 14. The next day was the weekend. After the events of the past few days, Stella had no intention of going out. But Walter insisted she go for a riding lesson. When she arrived at the training ground and saw 3 familiar figures, she understood her grandfather's plan. She couldn't help but sigh. The old man was really trying every trick in the book to create opportunities for her. She walked over to them reluctantly. The moment Julian and the others saw her, they couldn't help but think of the stunning girl from the other night. Then they looked at Stella's face, covered in freckles and framed by those hideously large black glasses. Yes, this was definitely the real Stella. My grandfather told me to come. The 3 of them glanced at her but said nothing. Even Aiden, who usually couldn't stand the sight of her, didn't make any sarcastic remarks. In fact, he even walked up to her. Although his expression was still impatient, it was clear he was trying to control himself. "Do you know how to ride?" "Huh?" Stella was practically in shock. Heavens, this young master was actually willing to condescend to speak to her, and he was asking if she could ride. Was he going to teach her? Seeing Stella's stunned expression, Aiden realized how out of character he was acting. He cleared his throat awkwardly and explained, "Look, I didn't know Melanie was that kind of person. What happened yesterday, that wasn't my doing. I don't really like you, but I wouldn't tell someone to throw water on you. I've already dealt with that Melanie girl for you. Sorry about that." The young master grumbled out an apology, and Stella finally understood what was going on. Right, she had been so caught up in the crisis of her cover being blown that she had forgotten to find out who had thrown the water. Though it was obvious who it was. But how did Aiden know it was Melanie? She asked in disbelief, "How did you know it was Melanie? Don't tell me you investigated for me." "No way," Aiden immediately denied it, afraid Stella would think he had a crush on her. "It was my older brother who looked into it for you. I thought that Melanie was so tough, but she confessed everything after a few threats." Then, afraid that Stella would fall for Julian because of this, he quickly added, "Don't get the wrong idea. My brother only helped you because of the relationship between our families. After all, he promised Grandpa Rivers he would take care of you." Stella glanced at Julian, who was standing a short distance away, and nodded. Seeing that she had nothing more to say to him, Aiden felt there was nothing else for him to say either. He scratched his head and walked away. Stella didn't know how to ride, nor did she really want to learn. So she just sat on the side and soaked up the sun. As she was squinting her eyes, enjoying the comfortable sunlight, she suddenly felt something block her light. She opened her eyes in annoyance and saw that Julian had, at some point, walked over to her. She was sitting, and he was standing, and she could only feel that this young man was taller and more imposing than others his age. Stella sat up a little straighter and looked up at him. Although he was only 18, Julian was already very tall, handsome, and upright. He was wearing a protective vest, black riding breeches, and boots. He hadn't even taken off his helmet, clearly having just dismounted. "What is it?" Stella asked. He moved his lips as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't. He just took off his helmet and sat down in the chair next to her. He casually picked up a bottle of water and began to speak slowly. "That girl yesterday, was she really your friend?" He turned his head to look into her eyes, his gaze sharp, as if he would immediately see through any lie she told. Chapter 15. Stella paused, a sense of déjà vu washing over her. She saw a familiar expression on Julian's face. It was the same look the wretched Ethan Blackwood had given her yesterday when he asked if she was Stella. The only difference was that Julian's eyes held more doubt, while Ethan's had been calm, as if he had already seen through everything. "Great, are this uncle and nephew team trying to make my life difficult?" Stella smiled calmly. "Yes, that was my friend. Phew, it's a good thing she was near the school yesterday, otherwise I don't know how I would have faced everyone." Seeing her response, Julian didn't let up. He continued, Then what's her name? What school does she go to? You just arrived in Lockwood City not long ago. How did you make friends so quickly? He pressed on, not giving her a chance to evade. But Stella asked him mischievously, Brother Julian, why are you asking so many questions about my friend? Could it be you've fallen for her? Julian, who had been focused on his interrogation, was left speechless. Stella feigned a troubled expression. But your family has a marriage agreement with mine. Before we decide which of you is my fiancé, you'd better not fall for someone else. Julian grew annoyed, his voice rising slightly. What nonsense are you talking about? I'm not talking nonsense. You're asking so many details, even what school she goes to. Are you planning to pursue her? Her diversion threw him off track. Julian said coldly, I don't like anyone. I just wanted to remind you to be careful about the friends you make. Lockwood City isn't like other places, and your status has changed. Everyone who approaches you might have ulterior motives. You should be careful. Stella smiled. Oh, she cooed. So Brother Julian is worried about me. I'm so touched. She looked at him with feigned excitement. Julian looked back at her face, trying to detect any signs of a lie. Unfortunately, the girl's expression was flawless. After a few seconds, Julian admitted defeat, stood up, and prepared to leave. But the person behind him suddenly spoke, her voice calm and clear. That girl's name is Sula. She's a very good friend of mine. I knew her long before I came to Lockwood City. Sula Julian quickly ran through the names of Lockwood City's major prominent families in his mind, confirming that there was no such person. He gave a slight nod, said nothing more, and left. The topic was closed. Stella didn't know if Julian believed her or not, but even if he didn't, there was nothing he could do. In the end, fearing a scolding from her grandfather if she came back without even touching a horse, she had the instructor teach her how to mount. She was a quick learner with nimble movements. Although she deliberately held back, she quickly got the hang of it and began to appreciate the joy of riding. Meanwhile, the three Blackwood brothers were in the rest area, watching her ride freely around the training ground, each with a different expression. Aiden was somewhat surprised. I didn't expect that. The girl's pretty smart. Dylan had a servant bring out his personal tea set and poured himself a cup of De Hong Pao. He said nonchalantly, well, she is the top student after all. Julian watched Stella's unrestrained figure on horseback and said nothing. Chapter 16. When she got home, Stella felt like her whole body was about to fall apart. Riding was fun, but it was exhausting. Just as she was about to lie down and rest, Walter pulled her up. Grandfather, what is it? Walter asked gossipily, how did it go with the Blackwood boys today? Stella covered her face and yawned. How did it go? What do you mean? Grandfather, I'm so sleepy. Riding lessons are so tiring. Seeing her lack of interest, Walter couldn't help but tap her on the head. You were so focused on riding that you didn't chat with the boys. Stella, her eyes half closed, said wearily, I did. I talked with Aiden and Julian. Aiden? Julian Walter's eyes instantly lit up. He wanted to ask more, but Stella had already fallen into a deep sleep. With his answer, Walter left the room, feeling reassured. As he walked downstairs, he thought happily, so Julian isn't completely uninterested in my granddaughter. That's good, he's the one I like the most. As for that Aiden boy, Walter snorted. He was the most mischievous of the lot. He wouldn't let his precious granddaughter suffer with him. Although Stella's appearance wasn't particularly striking, she was kind-hearted and did so well in school. Moreover, she was the granddaughter of the Rivers family. She had to marry the person she liked best and who was most suitable for her. Walter's thoughts had already drifted far away. Meanwhile, Stella had indeed fallen asleep. When she woke up, it was almost evening. She rubbed her eyes, picked up her phone, and saw that she had several missed calls. They were from Finn. She quickly called back. Finn, what's up? It sounded noisy on the other end of the line. Stella thought she heard arguing in Chinese, but shouldn't Finn be in Lowe's Angels right now? After a few seconds, Finn finally spoke. Boss S, we're back. We're in Lockwood City now. Really? Stella jumped up from the bed in surprise. So soon? Of course you missed us to death, didn't you? Stella quickly got out of bed and put on her shoes. Where are you now? I'll come find you. Finn gave her an address and reminded her to bring the painting. Stella said, okay, and hung up. She peeked downstairs. Walter had already gone into his study. He was always busy with work and usually wouldn't come out until after 10. She grabbed her backpack and quietly slipped downstairs. She met Finn and the others in an underground arcade. Unlike the high-end entertainment venues she had been to since returning to Lockwood City, this arcade was rundown but crowded with a motley crew. On her way in, she passed 4 men with full-sleeve tattoos and 5 with facial scars. It was clearly not a respectable arcade. She navigated through the maze-like place and finally found Finn and Mimi. The 3 old friends were reunited at last and hugged each other excitedly. "Boss S, I missed you so much." "Me too." Finn's name sounded cute, but he was actually a 6'1" boy with some muscle. Mimi, the third of the group, was a girl with a round face and dimples when she smiled. The 3 separated, and when Finn and Mimi saw the disastrous makeup on her face, they burst out laughing shamelessly. "Ha ha ha, Boss S, is this the disguise you were talking about? It's hilarious." Mimi couldn't help but laugh too. "Boss S, you looked better before." Stella was a bit helpless. "I know I looked better before. I'm just afraid of being found by those people from Lowe's Angels." Finn tried to reassure her. "Don't worry, you're in Lockwood City now. There's no way they can find you. Better safe than sorry." Chapter 17. They kept laughing. Stella, speechless, took a tissue from her pocket and wiped everything off her face, then took off her glasses and put them in her bag. "Is this better? It's not like anyone will recognize me here anyway." After laughing his fill, Finn finally asked, all right, Boss S, did you bring the painting?" Stella nodded and took the painting out of her bag. "What's in this thing anyway? You've been so mysterious about it." Finn watched her roughly unroll the painting, which was worth hundreds of thousands and was at a loss for words. He carefully took it from her. "You don't understand. This belongs to a major client of mine." "Client?" Stella's eyes narrowed, her expression growing serious. Finn realized he had slipped up. Seeing his boss's increasingly dangerous expression, he trembled and hid behind Mimi. "What's going on? Didn't you say that if this thing fell into the wrong hands, our identities would be exposed?" Finn played dead. Mimi had to explain for him. "Boss S, it's like this. This thing is actually a commercial secret that Finn got for someone. He hid it in the painting, but it was accidentally stolen and sold to an auction house. Then, why did he lie to me?" The 6'+ man hid behind a small girl, trembling in fear of another small girl. "I was afraid you wouldn't take it seriously. It was an emergency. The reward for this job is 5 million, Boss S, I'll give you half." 5 million, only 5 million? Stella finally snapped. She pulled Finn out and started beating him up. 5 million. You lied to me for 5 million. I spent 7 million to get this painting for you. What? Both of them were shocked. But before they could say anything more, the noisy arcade suddenly fell silent. Everyone in the place was being cleared out. Stella watched warily as black-clad bodyguards appeared. Finn, however, stood in front of the 2 girls and said in a low voice, "Don't be afraid. It's probably my client." Client? A very bad feeling rose in her heart. Ethan Blackwood had wanted that painting so badly. Could it be? The next second, a tall man emerged from behind 4 bodyguards. His gaze passed over Finn and landed squarely on Stella. His expression was a mixture of amusement and sarcasm. Stella closed her eyes in resignation, resisting the urge to beat Finn to a pulp. Of course, it was Ethan Blackwood. Finn held up the painting and tossed it onto a nearby arcade machine. His expression was serious. "The goods are here. Want to inspect them?" Ethan chuckled lightly. "No need." The bodyguard who was about to pick up the painting immediately stopped. Finn frowned. "What do you mean, no inspection? If there's a problem later, whose fault will it be?" Ethan slowly walked forward, still not looking at Finn, but at Stella, who couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze. It wasn't that she was scared. It was just too embarrassing. Ethan didn't answer Finn's question. He just twisted the ring on his index finger and said, "I told you, holding on to that painting won't do you any good." Stella turned her head angrily. "None of your business." Seeing her puffed-up cheeks, Ethan seemed to find it amusing. He wasn't bothered by her attitude. He turned to his bodyguard and ordered, "Take the goods." The bodyguard then stepped forward and took the painting. "The 5 million has already been transferred to your account, but," he paused, looking at Stella again. "As for the other 2 million, I'm not paying." Chapter 18. Long after Ethan and his men had left, Stella was still reeling from the embarrassment. This was a major screw-up. Finn and Mimi, however, looked at her with confusion. From Ethan's words, it seemed like he knew their boss. Stella shot a fierce glare at the unreliable Finn, and before they could ask, explained, "At the auction, he was the one bidding against me for this painting." Huh? Finn's mouth dropped open. He knew he had really screwed his boss over this time. Wait a minute, I tracked this thing's whereabouts myself. How could he have known it was being auctioned at the same time as me? Stella rolled her eyes. In Lockwood City, Ethan probably knew if a bird broke its wing, let alone something he was actively tracking. She punched Finn a few more times and said viciously, "If you ever dare to lie to me for a job again, I'll break your hands." Finn immediately begged for mercy. Never again from now on, I'll be your good little boy, Boss S." On the road outside the arcade, Ethan sat in the back of his car. He glanced at the painting a few times, then handed it to his assistant in the front passenger seat. "Mr. Blackwood, what's so special about this painting?" The assistant couldn't help but ask. Ethan looked out the window, his mind still on Stella. He answered nonchalantly, "The item is in the lining." "Oh," the assistant said, finally understanding. Then he remembered something else. "The girl back there, she seems to be the one who was bidding against you at the auction. She spent $7 million on this painting just to sell it to you." By the end, even the assistant found it incredible. And for $5 million, such a pretty girl, how could she be so foolish? At the mention of Stella, Ethan's expression relaxed. Thinking of her frustrated face today, he quickly figured out what had happened. He thought she was such a clever little fox, but it turned out she had been duped by her own teammate. A couple of days ago, when the underground operative had told him the goods were in hand, Ethan had been skeptical. He knew the painting was with Stella, and if even he couldn't get it from her, it was unlikely anyone else could. So the only possibility was that she and Finn knew each other. Ethan didn't need to come in person to collect the goods today, but he came anyway to confirm his suspicion. And he was right. However, he was becoming more and more interested in this young girl. Although he didn't know her identity yet, he knew that Finn was a well-known underground operative in Los Angeles, a night person, who took on any job, legal or illegal. The other girl who hadn't spoken was probably the female hacker who was always with Finn. 3 years ago, at the National Underground Hacker Competition, she had shocked everyone by defeating the world's #1 hacker, Lauren, to take first place. They were not to be trifled with, and she was hanging out with these two. He was getting more and more curious about her identity. Chapter 19. Finn and Mimi rented an apartment in Lockwood City to make their work easier. After catching up with them, Stella returned to the Rivers estate. After all, she was still a beleaguered high school senior and couldn't be as free as before. She still had to attend classes. The next day, when Stella returned to her classroom, she noticed that all the boys were looking at her much more kindly than before. Puzzled, she sat down. Soon, someone came over to chat her up, the topic invariably being the banquet last Friday. "Stella Rivers, is that beautiful girl really your friend? Does she have a boyfriend?" "Stella, we've been classmates for a while, but I don't even have your contact info. Come on, let me add you, and by the way, send me your friend's contact." Stella was speechless, so that's why these young masters were suddenly interested in her. They were all after her friend. Stella rolled her eyes and said, "My friend isn't from around here. She's already left Lockwood City. You won't be able to see her." The boys obviously didn't believe her. "That's not very nice of you. We're all classmates. What's wrong with getting to know each other's friends?" They still didn't know that Stella was the granddaughter of the Rivers family. They thought simply, since she seemed to be just a poor girl with good grades, her friend couldn't be wealthy either. And she was so beautiful, they hadn't been able to forget her for 2 days. Once they got her, wouldn't she be at their mercy? These rich second-generation kids were used to being arrogant. Stella saw through their intentions. After they pestered her relentlessly, she grew impatient, her voice turning cold. "I said, she's left. What else is there to ask?" The boys were first taken aback by her sudden cold tone, then they realized, who did this poor, ugly girl think she was, acting so arrogantly? One of them, Angus Thorne, who was usually the most domineering, kicked her desk leg. "Stella Rivers, don't be ungrateful. Give me your friend's number or don't blame me for getting nasty." Stella laughed. She was curious to see how nasty he could get. Too bad she doesn't have a phone. Knowing she was lying, Angus couldn't tolerate this ugly girl's insolence. He clenched his fist and moved closer. "Are you really not going to tell me?" Just as Stella was about to speak, a cool voice came from behind her. "Stella Rivers, the classmates just want to get to know your friend. You don't have to be so stingy, do you?" She turned her head. It was Melanie standing behind her, no longer with her usual proud and arrogant demeanor. Although her eyes were still full of resentment, she didn't dare to show it too openly. Last Friday, Julian Blackwood had actually reprimanded her for this ugly girl. Melanie couldn't believe it. But still afraid of the Blackwood family, Melanie didn't dare to openly confront her anymore. Stella smiled. "I don't want to introduce my friend to you. Is there a problem?" Melanie sneered. "HMPH, you're just afraid she'll make you look even uglier by comparison." "So what if I am? But next to my friend Melanie, you don't look so good either," she said with a nonchalant smile. But her words hit a nerve. Before that girl appeared, all these boys used to flock around her. She stomped her foot angrily and returned to her seat. Angus looked at Stella impatiently. "I've been nice to you, haven't I?" The next second, the hand of the man who had been so menacing was suddenly twisted back sharply. Julian Blackwood expressionlessly released his hand, tossing him aside like a piece of trash. His voice was cold. "You're in my way." Then, as if nothing had happened, he walked around the crowd and returned to his seat. Chapter 20. As soon as he appeared, the others scattered like birds, not daring to say another word. Even Angus, who had been so arrogant, didn't dare to curse out loud after being pushed to the ground. He just shot a venomous glare in their direction and then ran to the nurse's office, cradling his nearly dislocated hand. The classroom returned to silence. Stella said nothing about Julian's intervention. She didn't want to flatter herself. Maybe Julian wasn't helping her at all, but was simply annoyed that these people were blocking his way. She paid it no mind and focused on the class. No one dared to bother her again, and the day passed quickly. As school was about to end, Stella, planning to meet Finn and Mimi that evening, turned and tugged on the sleeve of Julian's uniform. Julian turned to look at her, his expression no better than when he had dealt with Angus earlier. "HMPH, I help her out in the morning, and she only talks to me in the evening. Her reaction time is pretty slow." Stella squeezed out a smile. "Brother Julian, I have something on tonight, so I won't be taking the car home with you guys." He didn't answer immediately. He just stared at her for a few moments, then turned back to the professional book on his desk and coldly uttered one word: "Whatever." Stella sensed that he was in a bad mood, but she didn't care much. The thought of reuniting with her friends made her eagerly pack her things and leave the classroom. After leaving the school, Stella felt a sense of relief. She had never liked being constrained. After a long stretch, she noticed it was getting late and decided to take a shortcut through a small alley. But there, she saw several burly men with clubs and a smug-looking Angus walking towards her. She slowly stopped, her eyes sharp as she watched the menacing group. The man in the middle, who looked the fiercest and had a scar on his face, was clearly the leader. When he saw Stella's face, his expression turned to disgust. "Young Master Thorne, your taste is questionable." Angus glanced at him. "Are you blind? You think I'd be interested in her? I'm looking for her friend." The man with the scar immediately smiled fawningly. "Understood, understood." Angus saw Stella standing still and assumed she was putting on a brave face. He sneered, "Once you're out of school, let's see who can help you now." His expression was vicious. He was clearly blaming her for the humiliation he had suffered at Julian's hands that morning. Stella looked at him and his cronies coldly, finding the whole situation utterly boring. She even said brazenly, "So much nonsense. What can a few of you do to me?" The scarred man was clearly angered. He threw a small knife from his hand. "You brat, you're asking for it?" at the school. Melanie and her friend were the last to leave the classroom. As they packed their things, her friend comforted her. "Melanie, don't be sad. There are plenty of opportunities to deal with that ugly girl, Stella." At the mention of Stella, Melanie's face, though still filled with hatred, also showed a hint of schadenfreude. "Why would I need to deal with her? That brat pissed off Angus. She's done for." Her friend could tell from her expression that something was up and excitedly pulled her arm. "What happened? What happened? Tell me." Seeing that the classroom was empty, Melanie smiled and said, "I heard Angus on the phone today saying he was going to teach her a lesson. You know the Thorne family has a shady background. He definitely called in some thugs to deal with Stella. Let's see who can save her now." With that, she and her friend burst into laughter and walked out of the classroom hand in hand. But just as they stepped out, they saw a handsome, elegant figure standing at the door. Melanie froze instantly, stammering, "J. Julian Blackwood." Julian's face was cold as ice. He gave her a ruthless glare, then turned and ran towards the school gate. Chapter 21. As dusk settled, Stella planned to deal with this group of reckless hooligans before it got completely dark. With a slight movement, she easily dodged the knife thrown by Scarface. When she looked up again, Angus and the thugs realized that the girl in front of them had terrifyingly sharp eyes. "You're courting death." She slowly uttered those words, quickly picked up the fallen knife, and charged forward. A few seconds later, the thugs with clubs finally reacted, raising their thick clubs to shield Angus. At this point, they still didn't take Stella seriously, thinking she was just making a desperate last stand. Their faces were all filled with contempt. But after Stella swiftly moved past all of them, the burly men discovered that their clothes had all been slashed. Stella stopped at the other end, watching the still dazed group, casually playing with the knife. They were stunned for a few seconds, but were quickly consumed by anger at being humiliated by this young girl. One of them swung his club at Stella, but her movements were incredibly agile. She quickly circled behind the man and kicked him hard in the back, sending him crashing to the ground. Seeing this, the others no longer dared to underestimate her. They exchanged a look and charged at her together. Stella was unfazed, cracking her knuckles and joining the fray. The seemingly weak and gentle girl could fight so well. Angus was completely stunned. Before he could realize something was wrong, the ground was already littered with big men. The next second, a silver light flashed before his eyes. Stella had him from behind, holding the small knife to his neck. She sneered, "Angus, the people you hired aren't very good." Angus's legs were trembling. "If you dare to hurt me, my family won't let you go." Scarface looked at his men on the ground and slowly backed away. "You brat, you've got some skills, but you've messed with me. You're dead," Stella said nonchalantly. "It looks to me like you're the one whose death is imminent, yet you're still talking tough." Scarface, not daring to act rashly while Angus was in her hands, said, "I, Spike Young, am a name in Lockwood City. If you harm young Master Thorne today, you'll be hunted by the entire city's underworld." Every city has its dark side beneath the glittering surface. In a prosperous city like Lockwood, there were many hidden, unsavory secrets, and Spike was indeed a someone of note in the city's underworld. This time, he had come to block this girl to curry favor with the Thorne family and break into Lockwood's elite circle. But he had ended up being humiliated. And if something happened to Angus on his watch, he could kiss his chances of entering Lockwood's elite circle goodbye. Thinking this, Spike's eyes grew even more malicious, but Stella was completely unfazed by his threats. She had been hunted so many times, she was used to it. However, Angus was still a classmate. Though he was nasty and stupid, he wasn't worth her getting her hands dirty. She kicked him in the knee, and the man in front of her cried out in pain and involuntarily knelt on the ground. Stella looked at him coldly. "Kneel and apologize to me, and I'll spare you." Angus roared, "You ugly girl, in your dreams." He had never been so humiliated in his life. He looked up at Stella's profile with hatred and then suddenly lunged forward, foolishly trying to grab the knife from her hand. Stella hadn't expected the coward to fight back. Caught off guard, she stumbled back a few steps. Spike seized the opportunity and charged forward. Stella's right hand was tightly gripped by Angus, and Spike was already upon her, trying to snatch the knife. She knew she was in trouble. Just as she was about to kick out, the two men in front of her suddenly grunted in extreme pain. Both of them fell to the ground, pinned down by a heavy foot. Stella's mind went blank. She looked up and saw Ethan Blackwood's unreadable face. Chapter 22. "Are you okay?" The bodyguards dragged the men on the ground away. Ethan walked up and took the young girl's hand, his expression hardening. Her hand was red from being gripped. He turned and looked at the two men cowering on the ground, his eyes like he was looking at dead men. "Tired of living?" Spike Young, of course, knew Ethan Blackwood. He was practically on his knees begging for mercy. He had heard of this young master of the Blackwood family when he was just starting out. He was a ruthless and powerful character who could turn the world upside down. And today, he had intervened for a young girl. Who was this girl? Spike knew he had gotten himself into big trouble this time. "Mr. Blackwood, please have mercy. I didn't know this girl knew you. Please have mercy." Stella watched coldly as the underworld boss, who had been so arrogant just moments ago, now begged for his life like a dog. She found the scene amusing and let out a small laugh. It was quiet, but Ethan, being close to her, naturally heard her chuckle. For some reason, the anger in his heart dissipated. He pressed his tongue against his teeth, suddenly feeling a bit annoyed. Here he was, furious on her behalf, and she herself was neither scared nor angry. She was even laughing. She clearly hadn't been frightened at all. So what was he getting angry about? He lifted his eyes, his tone indifferent. Get lost. And don't let me see you in Lockwood City again. Spike, as if granted a pardon, quickly scrambled to his feet and scurried away with his limping men. Seeing this, Angus no longer dared to put on a brave face. He crawled on his hands and knees to Stella and apologized. I was wrong. I'll never do it again, Miss Stella. From now on, I'll steer clear of you whenever I see you. After kowtowing, he also scrambled away. Once everyone was gone, the alley returned to its quiet state. Ethan naturally took her arm and led her out. Let's go. I'll take you home. After what had happened, she was no longer in the mood to meet Finn and Mimi, so she obediently followed him. She walked slowly. Although she felt she could have handled it even if Ethan hadn't shown up, he had, after all, saved her. She said in a low voice, "Thank you, Uncle." Julian smiled. So obedient now, weren't you fierce when you were hitting people earlier? Stella was speechless. She knew he must have seen it all long ago, only stepping in when she was at a disadvantage. This damn man, who knows how much he saw. Ethan hadn't arrived that early. He had arrived just as she was threatening Angus to kneel, and he had seen the indifference and arrogance in her eyes. At that moment, Mr. Blackwood had been thinking, what would it be like if Walter Rivers saw his supposedly weak and gentle granddaughter in a fight? As they reached the end of the alley, they saw Julian walking briskly towards them. Not knowing where Angus had cornered her, he had circled the entire campus and had only just found them, only to see her perfectly fine, walking beside his youngest uncle. As the three of them got closer, Julian slowed down, composing himself and hiding the panic he had felt just moments ago. He reverted to his usual calm and collected demeanor. Stella, what's he doing here? Ethan glanced at his nephew and asked, What are you doing here? Julian looked at the two of them and replied calmly, Just taking a walk. Chapter 23. In the end, all three of them got into Ethan's car. Stella quickly claimed the front passenger seat, leaving the back seat for the uncle and nephew. The result was that neither of the two men in the back was willing to start a conversation. Finally, unable to bear the atmosphere, Stella spoke up to break the ice. Uncle, why was that man so afraid of you? Her tone was incredibly innocent, as if she really didn't know how terrifying the man sitting behind her was. Ethan closed his eyes, feigning rest, and said nonchalantly, I don't know. Maybe he owes me money. Who would dare to owe you money? She thought to herself, but on the surface, she still pretended to be naive. That Spike Young seemed to be from the underworld. Uncle, how could you lend money to him? Ethan really wanted to tear off this girl's mask of innocence, but before he could, a cool voice interjected. Uncle, grandfather has told you many times not to associate with those kinds of people. Julian had been listening for a while and had pieced together the whole story. It was simply that the thugs Angus had hired had been dealt with by his all-powerful youngest uncle. He couldn't help but speak up. Julian was a typical old-school gentleman who never deigned to associate with people outside his social class, especially underworld thugs. He wouldn't even give them a second glance. Hearing his nephew's words, Ethan slowly opened his eyes. Are you talking to me? His voice was no longer the slightly lazy tone he used with Stella. It was deep and filled with pressure. Julian had always respected and feared him. He respected his abilities, but feared his methods. Now, speaking out so rashly, he wasn't sure what had possessed him. Being lectured by his own nephew was a new experience for Ethan. In the Blackwood family, he listened to almost no one. Even the old Mr. Blackwood couldn't control him. Julian's expression was impassive. Even though he regretted speaking out, he still said, I just hope that the Blackwood family doesn't get involved with unsavory characters. Ethan seemed to laugh. Are you afraid I'll tarnish the Blackwood family's reputation? Julian's concern wasn't entirely unfounded. Ethan wasn't just a business tycoon. He had his hands in both the legal and illegal worlds. He was practically omnipotent in Lockwood City, but his power also attracted gossip. A century-old family like the Blackwoods placed great importance on their reputation. Therefore, despite his outstanding abilities, Ethan was considered an exception in the family. Sensing the atmosphere becoming tense, Stella didn't want to get caught in the crossfire. She tried to make herself as small as possible. "Julian, I wouldn't dare. Uncle has his own way of doing things. But I heard that a piece of technology developed by Xiaoming in the US recently ended up in your hands. Director Song of Xiaoming has been going around saying the Blackwood family uses despicable methods and bullies others. These things don't sound good." US, technology, the story sounded familiar. Stella instantly thought of the commercial secret Finn had obtained for Ethan. Could it be that? Ethan seemed too lazy to explain to his stubborn nephew. He closed his eyes again. Business isn't like studying. You can't just recite some classical poetry and expect things to work out. "Julian, you've been in your ivory tower for too long." Sensing that Ethan was not in a good mood, Julian said no more. Chapter 24. Stella continued to pretend she didn't exist until the driver stopped the car at the river's gate. She shot out of the car without so much as a goodbye. Only the uncle and nephew were left in the car. Just when Julian thought Ethan wouldn't speak again, he suddenly did. "You came looking for Stella today, didn't you?" Julian was taken aback and didn't immediately deny it. Ethan, who had at some point opened his eyes, stared at his profile for a moment. His tone was somewhat triumphant. "What a pity. You were too late." The next day, when Stella went to school, she found that both Angus and Melanie had been transferred to another class. And it was the class furthest from Class A. It was clear they wanted to be as far away from her as possible. Stella couldn't help but marvel once again at how terrifying that man was. After that, she didn't know if someone had said something to the other students, but no one bothered her anymore. Her senior year of high school finally became peaceful. Julian was as cold as ever, not speaking to her unless necessary. Dylan acted as if she didn't exist. Although they were in the same class, he was always a loner, with only his high-quality tea as his companion. Aiden, however, no longer looked down on her as before and gradually realized that besides being a bit ugly, she wasn't so bad. As for Stella, without the disturbances, she was living a very comfortable life. During her free time, she could even take on missions with Finn and the others. She was living a life of utter freedom. This peaceful life lasted for a month or two, until a girl in a little white dress appeared, carrying a suitcase and insisting on seeing Walter Rivers at the gate of the Rivers estate. Ivy Stone looked at the magnificent and grand villa of the Rivers family, her heart filled with longing. She became even more determined in her decision to leave home. She had to stay here that day. After returning home from school, Stella noticed the butler's very serious expression. After leading her to the main hall, she saw a tearful Ivy Stone standing in the living room. Stella didn't know this girl, but she instinctively frowned, a bad feeling creeping over her. When Walter saw Stella, he called her over. Stella sensed that her grandfather's expression was somewhat stern. "Grandfather, who is this?" When Ivy saw Stella's face, a wave of disgust washed over her. How could such an ugly person be worthy of everything the Rivers family has? Walter looked at Stella, then at Ivy, and sighed, then took out an item. Stella was surprised. "My necklace? This is my necklace." Ivy suddenly became agitated and shouted at Stella. "Stella, you stole my identity, and I don't blame you, but this necklace was left to me by my parents. I will never let you have it." Her grief-stricken tone made Stella's ears ring. And then, she seemed to understand. This girl looked a bit familiar. She remembered where she had seen her. She was the daughter of her supposed adoptive parents, Ivy Stone. After being identified as the long-lost granddaughter of the Rivers family, Stella, in order to keep her previous identity from being exposed, had specially found a simple farming couple to be her adoptive parents, pretending that they had raised her all these years. They had a daughter who was in high school in the county town. Stella had met her once and had some impression of her. It was the girl in front of her. Looking at Ivy's expression, as if she had suffered a great injustice, and then at the necklace she had carelessly lost, she already understood what was going on. She looked at Walter, her tone frank and calm. "Grandfather, I did a DNA test with you." Chapter 25. If the DNA test hadn't confirmed she was indeed Walter's granddaughter, with her personality, would she have stayed in the Rivers' home and been a good girl? She just wanted to accompany her, only relative in his later years. But Ivy interrupted again. That DNA test must have been faked by you, Stella. I've always treated you well since we were young. Why would you impersonate me? Stella sighed. Good grief, this person is more into the act than I am. Treated me well since we were young? This is only the second time we've met. Ivy then turned to Walter and cried with genuine emotion. Grandfather, I've worn this necklace since I was a child. I am your real granddaughter. Stella was tired of her lies and said directly, First of all, this necklace is mine. Let's put that aside for now. You say your grandfather's granddaughter, but a necklace alone is not enough proof. I can do a DNA test with grandfather, Ivy cut in, her eyes burning as she stared at Stella, as if Stella were the unforgivable person who had stolen her identity. Walter looked at the two girls in front of him. In his 60-plus years in the business world, he had never been so troubled. In his heart, he was still willing to believe Stella. But when he saw the necklace Ivy presented, he couldn't help but think of his late son and daughter-in-law. The necklace was indeed his granddaughter's. Seeing Walter's troubled expression, Stella felt sorry for the old man. He had finally found his granddaughter, only to be faced with such a situation. She didn't blame him for not completely believing her, especially with Ivy's righteous act. Even she was starting to doubt if she was the imposter. She said calmly, Fine, then go and do a DNA test with grandfather. The results will speak for themselves. Let's do it, Walter, his head throbbing from Ivy's crying, agreed to the decision and temporarily housed Ivy in a guest room upstairs. The next day at school, Stella seemed completely unaffected by the incident, getting into the car with an unchanged expression. However, she could feel the probing gazes of the other three. Clearly, they had already heard about the real and fake heiress situation and were probably wondering if the person in the car with them was the real or fake one. Stella couldn't help but smile. She looked at the most curious of them, Aiden. Why are you looking at me like that? Called out, Aiden felt a bit embarrassed and looked away. I heard a girl came to your house yesterday. He was being tactful. Stella didn't hide it. That's right, and she said she's grandfather's real granddaughter. Aiden's eyes widened. He hadn't expected Stella to be so open about it, and it left him at a loss for words. Another silence fell, but Aiden clearly couldn't hold it in. Stella, are you the real one or the fake one? If you're the fake one, you'd better admit it quickly, or it will be very bad for you. There was actually a hint of concern in his words, which Stella found strange. When she first came to the Rivers' home, Aiden had disliked her the most. Why was he now concerned about her fate if she were an imposter? She's doing the DNA test with grandfather today. You'll know the answer then. After that, she said no more. Although Julian had been silent, he had been observing Stella's reaction. To be so calm after someone showed up claiming she was an imposter, this girl's mental fortitude was truly impressive. Chapter 26. At school, things were surprisingly peaceful. Although her status as the Rivers' heiress was now in jeopardy, fortunately, few people at school knew she was Walter's granddaughter in the first place. So school became the one place she could think quietly. Thinking of Ivy's confident demeanor, she felt that things were not as simple as they seemed. Something was wrong, very wrong. Where did that Ivy get the audacity and confidence to impersonate her? Although she appeared calm, Stella felt a faint sense of unease. The day passed quickly. When she returned to the Rivers estate, Walter and Ivy were still sitting in the living room. Although they were still waiting for the test results, Ivy looked completely confident. Stella observed her expression, her own face darkening as she thought. Soon, the butler hurried in with a sealed envelope. He handed the envelope to Walter. Chairman, the results are here. Stella saw her grandfather's hand tremble as he took the envelope. He glanced at Stella before slowly opening it and taking out the thin sheet of paper inside. She saw Walter's face stiffen, as if he had seen something unbelievable, and on Ivy's face was a smile of complete certainty. Stella spoke. Grandfather, her DNA also matches yours as a relative, doesn't it? Walter nodded with a complex expression, his mind in a turmoil. Ivy said triumphantly, I told you I'm grandfather's real granddaughter, you imposter, Stella retorted calmly, but I also did a DNA test with grandfather, and the results were also a match. Who knows what tricks you pulled, Stella sneered. And who's to say you didn't pull any tricks? Ivy was at a loss for words, then she remembered something. I also have the necklace. That's my proof, the two argued back and forth, and Walter's head began to throb. Enough, stop arguing, both girls' DNA matched, but he only had one granddaughter. Walter felt like he was about to break down. Stella also knew that in the current situation, she was at a disadvantage, but she would never let her grandfather be deceived by this malicious person. At this moment, the butler, seeing the old master's distress, said, "Since both young ladies' DNA match, why not let them both stay at home for now? We can observe them slowly. The truth can't be determined in a day. A fake will eventually reveal themselves. I believe that in time, the truth will come out." His words resonated with Walter. He nodded wearily. "Let's do that for now. I haven't been feeling well lately. When I'm better, I'll deal with this. You two will both stay here for the time being." With that, he was helped upstairs by the butler. Soon, only the two real and fake heiresses were left in the living room. Stella approached Ivy step by step, her tone sharp. "You came so well prepared. What is your motive?" Ivy pretended not to understand. "You imposter, grandfather will kick you out of the Rivers house sooner or later." Stella sneered coldly, ignored her, and went upstairs. Chapter 27. With Ivy staying at the Rivers estate, Stella's situation became a bit awkward. Originally, Walter had arranged for her to practice riding with the Blackwood brothers on weekends. When Ivy saw this, she insisted on going along. At the training ground, Ivy was seeing this kind of wealthy entertainment for the first time and was completely amazed. When Aiden saw Stella bring her, his mouth dropped open as well. "This is too dramatic," he thought. "What's going on now? Does Grandpa Rivers have two granddaughters?" At the sight of the three handsome and aloof young men, especially feeling their noble and cool aura, Ivy's heart fluttered. She became even more jealous and resentful of Stella. What right did someone like her have to be with such handsome men? She deliberately quickened her pace, walking ahead of Stella, and smiled sweetly at Julian. "Hello, I'm Ivy." Silence. Ivy hadn't expected the three handsome men to completely ignore her. She stood there awkwardly, lowering her hand. It wasn't that Julian and the others were completely on Stella's side, but Walter's attitude was clearly unclear, which meant that Ivy's identity was still suspicious. Stella was, after all, the granddaughter Walter had publicly acknowledged in front of all of Lockwood City's prominent families. So, until Walter made a clear statement, no one would treat Ivy as the legitimate Miss Rivers. Stella clearly had no intention of helping her out of her awkward situation. She put on her helmet and vest and went to find her horse to mount. Ivy saw that they were all acting so naturally, as if she were the odd one out. She ran over to Stella and snatched the reins from her hand. "This isn't yours." Stella's eyes turned cold. "What did you say? You're an imposter. Everything you have now isn't yours, yet you still have the nerve to enjoy it all. You're shameless." Her loud voice quickly attracted the attention of others. By the time Julian walked over, Stella had one hand pressing Ivy's head against the horse, her expression one of extreme impatience. This was the first time she had shown her true personality in front of the Blackwoods. This Ivy was just too annoying. She leaned down and whispered in her ear, "Between the two of us, you know best who's real and who's fake. I don't know what tricks you used to fake the DNA test, but you'd better not be so arrogant. Otherwise, I will make you regret ever coming to Lockwood City." As she spoke the last words, her tone grew heavier and the pressure of her hand increased. Ivy, pinned against the horse, screamed. It was Julian who came and pulled Stella's hand away. The two rarely had physical contact, and his hand, unlike his personality, was warm. Julian looked at her. "In this situation, doing this won't do you any good." Knowing he meant well, Stella still shook off his hand. "This is boring. I'm going home." Watching Stella's unrestrained back as she left, a flicker of disappointment appeared in Julian's handsome eyes. When he heard Ivy shouting, he had felt a moment of panic, afraid that Stella would be bullied, so he had quickly dismounted and walked over. But it seemed she didn't need him at all. Chapter 28. Back at the Rivers estate, Stella quickly packed a few things, deliberately making a lot of noise. When she came downstairs with her suitcase, Walter and the butler were blocking her way. "Stella, what are you doing?" Her voice was hard. "Grandfather, I know you also suspect that I'm an imposter. I can't stay at the Rivers house for now. Please let me go." Walter couldn't let her go. He quickly blocked her. "We haven't figured things out yet. Why are you leaving?" Stella listened to grandfather, even though it now seemed more likely that Ivy was the real granddaughter. Walter's heart still subconsciously favored Stella. She was touched, but her face remained cold. "I have to go. I can't stay here anymore. Grandfather, take care of yourself." With that, she ignored her grandfather and the butler's protests. The two old men couldn't stop her, and she left with her suitcase. Leaving the Rivers estate, Stella didn't really have anywhere to go, but she knew she had to leave now. She called Finn, briefly explained the situation, and immediately headed to Finn and Mimi's apartment. Finn was not short of money. The apartment he rented, though not as luxurious as the Rivers estate, was still quite large, more than enough for 3 people. But the 2 people in the apartment were indignant at the injustice Stella had suffered. "Who does that Ivy think she is? Daring to impersonate our Boss S?" "Yeah, Boss S, and you just moved out? Isn't that exactly what she wants? I bet she's after your family's fortune." Stella shook her head. She knew it wasn't that simple. Her eyes were sharp. "She couldn't have pulled this off alone. She doesn't have the ability to deceive my grandfather like that." Finn thought about it and agreed. "So you're saying she definitely has someone behind her?" Stella said with certainty. Although she didn't know who it was, she was sure they didn't have good intentions. Mimi also became vigilant. "Could it be someone who's after your family's fortune? The Rivers family is a prominent family, after all, and Walter Rivers has no other heirs. If they get rid of you, all the Rivers' assets will go to someone else." Stella shook her head, her eyes a little lost. She hadn't figured it all out yet. "I don't know." Although she didn't know who was behind Ivy yet, Stella knew that they would come looking for her first. All she had to do was wait. After leaving the Rivers estate, she stopped going to Imperial High altogether. She spent her days with Finn and Mimi, just like the old days. She was happy and carefree, completely unaware of the chaos outside as people searched for her. The Blackwood residence. Ethan had just returned from a business trip out of province when he learned of this bizarre incident. When he heard that Stella had left home in a fit of anger over Ivy's arrival, he twisted the ring on his index finger. A fit of anger? That little fox was not the type to be so impulsive. Just then, he saw Julian coming downstairs and casually asked, "Has Stella been to school these past few days?" Julian shook his head. "Uncle, you seem very concerned about her." Ethan paused, then didn't deny it. "That's right. What about it?" Julian, as if not expecting him to admit it so readily, said nothing, grabbed a drink and went back upstairs. Chapter 29. It was pouring rain in Lockwood City. Stella had just returned from a mission in a neighboring city with Finn. As soon as they got back to Lockwood, Finn immediately rushed off to his paradise, a bar to find his 10 or 8 female confidants. Stella, cursing him, shooed him away and walked home alone. It was close to 9:30 at night, and with the heavy rain, it was impossible to get a taxi in Lockwood City. Stella was soaked to the bone and had to take shelter under an eave. The rain pattered down, and the surroundings were silent. She squatted under the eave, watching the raindrops hit the ground one by one. She suddenly remembered her childhood. After being taken in by her master, she would be kicked out when she was disobedient. Sometimes it would be raining, but her master wouldn't soften, leaving her outside in the rain until she was willing to behave. Only then would he let her back in. Her master was very strict with her, but he also taught her many skills. He taught her how to fight, how to hack, how to study. After her master passed away, there was no one left to teach her with such dedication. She was lost in a sudden wave of memories and didn't notice a car approaching until its headlights blinded her. She looked up, dazed, and saw a tall figure get out of the car, holding an umbrella and walking towards her. As soon as Ethan got out of the car, he saw the young girl, drenched and with red-rimmed eyes, looking at him. He suddenly felt a pang in his heart. He reached out his hand to her. "Come with me." For some reason, Stella suddenly felt that this man, who was usually like the Reaper, was strangely gentle at this moment. Looking at the hand he held out to her, she, as if possessed, reached out her right hand. Ethan pulled gently, and the young girl was on her feet. He tilted the umbrella to cover most of her. Once in Ethan's car, she said a little awkwardly, I moved out of my grandfather's house." "I know." He was driving himself today, without a chauffeur. He started the engine and drove off, not saying where he was taking her. 20 minutes later, standing in Ethan's private villa, Stella caught the white towel he threw at her. "Why did you bring me here?" Ethan glanced at her sideways. "What, Did you want to go back to the Blackwood family home with me? Stella lowered her head and started to dry her face silently. Of course, that wasn't what she meant. As she was drying her face, she suddenly felt something was wrong. Ethan was standing right in front of her, staring at her face. Suddenly, she remembered something. Oh my God, did she just wipe off the freckles and dark powder from her face? Crap, she had forgotten about that. She froze, swallowing nervously. Seeing Ethan's playful gaze, she suddenly understood that he had done it on purpose. His eyes were full of "you blew your cover again," as he watched her reaction with amusement. This man had probably never believed her nonsense since the school banquet. The atmosphere was silent for a moment. Ethan pretended to sigh. I picked up the wrong person. I was looking for Stella. How did I find Stella's friend instead? Stella couldn't be bothered to act with him anymore. She threw the used towel at him and said angrily, "You're a terrible actor." Chapter 30. The empty villa echoed with the man's clear laughter. He caught the towel, looking somewhat helpless. So even playing along with you is wrong? Don't you like having two identities? Stella glared at him, but her fair, small face only looked cute. She turned angrily and sat down on his expensive sofa. She didn't care that her soaked clothes were staining it. Ethan's expression, however, turned serious. He walked over and pulled her up. Go take a shower and change your clothes. Stella stubbornly refused, thinking he was just worried about his sofa. She wriggled her bottom on it even more. I won't. Ethan looked at the disobedient child, his grip tightening slightly as he pulled her up. His tone, however, was gentle. Be good. What if you catch a cold? Without waiting for her to agree, he dragged her into the bathroom. 3 minutes later, the bathroom door opened again. Stella peeked out, her eyes wide. What am I supposed to change into? The next second, a set of solid colored pajamas was thrown at her head. Ethan turned and walked away after tossing them. They're new, never worn. Stella closed the bathroom door and looked at the gray pajamas. They were huge, clearly not her size, but the fabric felt comfortable. She felt uncomfortably damp and without any fuss took off her clothes and started showering. Half an hour later, she shuffled out of the bathroom, wearing the oversized pajamas. Ethan was sitting in the living room, working. When he saw her, he beckoned her over. Stella was wary, sensing that this man had ill intentions. She deliberately sat on the sofa furthest from him. Ethan chuckled, this ungrateful little thing. He closed his laptop. Remembering how pitiful she had looked squatting under the eaves alone, he deliberately put on an interrogative tone. Why were you out there alone? Taking shelter from the rain? She shrugged and answered honestly. Ethan was annoyed by her nonchalant attitude. I mean, why did you run away from home? He knew this little fox well. With her 800 tricks up her sleeve, could she really be driven away by a newcomer? And how could she not see that there was something wrong with that Ivy? This little girl was definitely up to something. Now that her true identity had been revealed to Ethan, although she didn't know if he would believe her, Stella couldn't be bothered to lie to him. She said directly, I don't think Ivy's appearance is that simple. Since her goal is to drive me away, I might as well leave and see what tricks she's up to. Ethan chuckled lightly. You're confident. Remember to call me if you get into trouble. Then, he didn't ask any more questions, which surprised Stella. She had been prepared for an interrogation. Didn't he want to know why she had disguised her appearance? Didn't he want to know if she was really Walter's granddaughter? Didn't he want to know what other identities she had? Ethan's silence left Stella's prepared speech unspoken. She stared at his face with her bright eyes, wondering if he was deliberately toying with her. Damn it, who's the one full of secrets here? I don't want to know anything. Attitude is making me lose face, but she didn't get the questions she expected from Ethan. Instead, he just calmly reopened his laptop. There are plenty of empty rooms upstairs. Pick one and get some rest. Stella, Chapter 31. Seeing that he really had nothing else to say, Stella stood up abruptly in frustration and headed upstairs. Fine, don't ask. Even if you ask next time, I won't tell you. But she didn't notice that, as she turned away, the man who had been looking down at his computer had a smile on his lips. Indeed, teasing a fox was more interesting. After a good night's sleep, when the sun was bright the next day, Ethan found that Stella was already gone. All that was left was a note gone. Took your clothes too, will wash and return them. SU simple, direct, and without a trace of sentimentality. Ethan was almost speechless with anger. He slowly crumpled the note in his hand, his gaze fixed on the signature. Not Stella Rivers, but S.U. It wasn't a name, but more like a code name. Was this the name she used in the U.S., with that operative and hacker? His eyes darkened, as if he had remembered something. Stella left Ethan's place and was heading back to Finn's apartment when she ran into a little boy of about 5 or 6 in an old residential area. The boy fell to the ground, his face tear-streaked. Stella's heart skipped a beat and she quickly helped him up. "I'm sorry, little one, did I hurt you?" The little boy, while crying, stared at Stella, mesmerized. "Wow, she's so beautiful, is she an angel?" He stammered. "And no, it doesn't hurt." Stella found him adorable. "Then why are you crying?" The little boy pouted and mumbled a long story. Stella barely understood. The boy's name was Leal. His mother had passed away, and he lived with his grandmother. This old building was their home. A year ago, it was sold to a real estate developer for demolition. But Leal's remarried, heartless father had conspired with the demolition office manager, Mr. Chen, to embezzle the money. He and his grandmother had nowhere to turn and could only come here every day to seek an explanation. But they were told his grandmother was causing trouble and would be kicked out. Leal had run out to find help. Stella was furious and immediately had Leal take her to his grandmother. Inside a large building, the heartless father and Mr. Chen were fawning over the real estate company's director Fang. Seeing Leal again, they were afraid of angering director Fang and quickly tried to shoo him away. "What are a bunch of old and weak people causing trouble for? Get lost." Stella stepped forward and helped Leal's grandmother up, her cold gaze sweeping over the heartless man. He, of course, paid no attention to this young girl and reached out to push them away, but his wrist was twisted back by Stella. "Ah!" a scream echoed through the hall. Stella, still twisting his arm, walked up to the manager. "Who is trying to steal Leal and his grandmother's money?" Seeing Director Fang's displeased expression, Mr. Chen cursed. "Where did this troublemaker come from? Go, go, go!" The next second, his left wrist was also sharply twisted back by Stella. The two men screamed like pigs being slaughtered in her hands. Director Fang saw the person walking in behind her, and his face turned pale with panic. Swish! Stella felt a rush of air behind her and quickly turned, throwing the two men she was holding. She then saw 2 black-clad bodyguards trying to ambush her. Her eyes narrowed, and she cracked her knuckles and charged forward. She was so focused on the fight that she didn't see the man standing behind the bodyguards. Chapter 32. In just a few minutes, she had beaten the 2 bodyguards back a few steps. Just as she was about to charge again, she saw the boss who had been watching from behind suddenly make a move, his speed incredibly fast. Stella didn't even see the man's face, but she could clearly feel that his skills were extraordinary. She immediately moved to block his attack, while also attacking his hand. Rip! It was the sound of a suit sleeve tearing. At the same time, she was pushed back forcefully. Evan Croft retracted his hand and stepped back, looking down at his torn sleeve with a complex expression, a mixture of disbelief and admiration. Meanwhile, Stella, her face now fully visible, stood frozen, clutching the piece of his sleeve. Evan Croft, her expression changed instantly, and she took a step back, her eyes wary. It was him. He was back in the country. Seeing that Evan's sleeve was torn, Director Fang's face turned purple with embarrassment. He was practically on his knees apologizing. "Mr. Croft, I am so sorry to let you—" Evan didn't seem to care. He waved his hand and walked up to Stella, extending his right hand. "Very good skills." "Ha ha!" Stella laughed awkwardly, thinking the psycho wanted to shake her hand. She ignored him. Evan didn't seem to mind. He said, "I mean, can I have my sleeve back?" Stella was speechless. This guy is insane. Who would want this rag? But the sight of him set off alarm bells in her head. This was a person she had to be wary of. Besides, wasn't he an American-born Chinese? Why was he suddenly back in the country? As Stella was thinking, she saw Mr. Chen and the heartless father trying to sneak away. She immediately forgot everything else and blocked their path. Then, with Leal and his grandmother, she blocked Director Fang. "Sir, aren't you going to solve Leal's problem? The house belonged to Leal's mother. His father has already remarried." Knowing that Evan hated noise, Director Fang said with a grim face, "Take it up with the police. Don't cause trouble here. Go away." He had gone to great lengths to invite Evan to discuss a partnership, only to have this happen. This was Evan Croft, a major tycoon from the US. The moment he saw his sleeve torn, Director Fang felt like his own life was being torn apart, but Stella's attitude was even more unyielding. Fine, let's call the police. Then I'll have the police come here to solve it. You promised to protect the homeowner's rights when you were demolishing, and now you want to wash your hands of it and let an old woman and a child be bullied. Evan, who had been listening from the side, understood the whole story. He looked at the tear in his sleeve and said in a deep voice, "Director Fang, if you haven't even resolved the most basic homeowner issues for this project, isn't it a bit early to be discussing a partnership with me?" Hearing him speak, Director Fang's previously procrastinating attitude immediately became resolute. He said to Mr. Chen, "He's already remarried and you still want to give him the money. Our group doesn't need such an irresponsible employee." "You're fired." Mr. Chen's face turned ashen. He was about to beg for mercy but was dragged away by the bodyguards. The heartless father, seeing that his plan to embezzle the money had failed, also slipped away quietly. Leal happily took his grandmother's and Stella's hands. "Yay, we drove him away." Stella smiled and high-fived him. "Leal is the best. I have to go now, okay?" With the matter resolved, all she wanted to do was leave quickly. Chapter 33. Director Fang, in front of Evan Croft, had made his position clear and fired Mr. Chen. He then approached with a sycophantic smile. "Mr. Blackwood, I am so sorry. I've been so busy lately. Our group is absolutely committed to protecting the rights of homeowners. Please come upstairs. The chairman is waiting for you." Only then did Ethan nod. He glanced towards the entrance and, as expected, the girl was gone. A faint smile touched his lips. She runs fast, but this was just the first time. No matter how fast she ran, he would find her. Stella rushed back to the apartment. Finn was out, and only Mimi was sitting in front of the computer. Seeing Stella's troubled expression, she immediately asked with concern, "Boss, what's wrong?" "Stella." "Mimi, I saw Evan Croft." As if the name were a bomb, Mimi shot up from her chair on high alert. Where is he? That bastard actually followed us back to the country." She frantically started packing things in the room, cursing as she did. "Let's escape back to the US now while he's not expecting it." By now, Stella had calmed down. Seeing Mimi's panicked state, she found it a bit amusing. Her initial reaction to seeing Evan was more surprise than fear. Although she had returned to the country because she had offended him, it was also because she was tired of the precarious life in the US and wanted some stability. Besides, Evan's appearance in Lockwood City was probably not that simple. She thought for a moment and stopped Mimi from packing. "Mimi, you and Finn stay here. I'll leave first." "What?" Mimi didn't understand, but then she immediately objected. "No way, boss. I can't let you go out there alone. Evan is dangerous." Yes, she knew Evan was dangerous. And because she knew, she couldn't let Finn and Mimi get involved. But Stella, of course, couldn't say that directly. She smiled and said, "It's like this, I have a plan. I'll go and lure him out, figure out what he's up to, then I'll contact you guys. That's better than the three of us being passive, right?" Hearing her say that, Mimi thought it made some sense, but she was still worried about Stella's safety. "But it's fine. Are you worried about my skills?" Half an hour later, Stella, with a backpack and wearing a black hoodie, walked out of the apartment. She pulled up her hood and wandered alone on the streets of Lockwood City, seemingly with no destination. She appeared to be walking alone, but Stella had long since sensed that she was being followed. She deliberately wound her way through the streets, and the person behind her maintained a constant distance, just following her. This continued until evening, when she walked into a deserted alley. Her steps slowly came to a halt, a slight smile on her tightly pressed lips. "Come out, Evan Croft." Chapter 34. Stella turned around to see Evan Croft. As expected, with 7 or 8 bodyguards behind him, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Croft, you really think highly of me. Even if you want to catch me, you don't need to bring so many people." Her tone was sarcastic, but Evan didn't mind. He walked closer, step by step. The famous SU of Los Angeles. "Of course, I can't be too careless when I come looking for you." Hearing him say that, Stella's previously calm eyes instantly turned sharp. She said, word by word, "Don't call me that." SU was the name her master had given her, and her master had been killed by the Croft family. So the last thing she did in the US was to throw the Croft family into chaos and hack their commercial secrets, selling them directly to their competitors. That was how she became the infamous #1 most wanted person by the Croft family in Los Angeles. And that was why she had returned to Lockwood City. By coincidence, she had discovered her true identity. She had been using a disguise to prevent the Croft family from finding her. She never thought she would be found in the end. Evan's tone was low. "Sula, are you coming with me willingly, or do I have my bodyguards invite you?" He said invite, but seeing the menacing looks on the bodyguards' faces, it was clear it wouldn't be a pleasant invitation. But she seemed completely unafraid. "You couldn't catch me in Los Angeles, Evan. What makes you think you can catch me now?" Evan sneered. "I'm afraid it's not up to you this time." With that, he lunged forward, trying to grab Stella's right hand, but her reaction was extremely fast. She dodged just before he could grab her, and the two of them began to fight. Evan was also a trained fighter, and he had the natural advantage of strength. But Stella's agility was superior, and he was never able to catch her. The bodyguards behind him, seeing that their boss seemed to be at a disadvantage, were about to step in. But before they could move, they were surrounded by another group of black-clad bodyguards. Ethan Blackwood emerged from behind the group. Seeing Evan's hand tightly gripping Stella's right wrist, his expression soured. "Mr. Croft, I've heard so much about you. It's not very becoming to treat a young lady like this." Evan and Stella stopped fighting. Evan's face darkened as he looked at the newcomer. Recognizing him as Ethan Blackwood, he hid some of his emotions. Ethan Blackwood's reputation was so great that even Evan, who had just returned to the country, had heard of him. But he still didn't let go of Stella's hand. "Mr. Blackwood, this is between me and Sula. It has nothing to do with you." "Sula." Ethan raised an eyebrow and looked at Stella. "You have a lot of names." He walked forward step by step and calmly pulled Stella's hand from his grasp, pulling her behind him. "This is Lockwood City. There is no Sula here, only my family's niece, Stella Rivers. If anyone dares to bully her here, then I will not allow it." He spoke each word slowly, but with a strong warning. Evan stared into his eyes, and he stared back. For a moment, the narrow alley was filled with tension, even though no one was speaking. After a long moment, Evan let out a low laugh. "But I heard that the Rivers family's granddaughter is someone else. Mr. Blackwood, Sulu is an underground operative from Los Angeles. Her master was the operative leader, Seth. A girl raised by an underworld boss, how could she be your delicate young lady from a prestigious family?" Stella's voice was sharp. "I told you, don't mention my master. You're not worthy," chapter 35. But thinking back on what Evan had said, she realized something and sneered. "I get it now. You sent Ivy, didn't you?" Evan took a few steps back, feigning ignorance. "If you come back to New York with me, I don't mind answering these boring questions for you." Stella rolled her eyes. Go back to New York with him? That would be like walking into the lion's den. Did he think she was stupid? Before she could speak, Ethan stepped in front of her. No matter who she was before, now she is the heir to the Rivers family, publicly acknowledged by Walter Rivers. If you want to take her away in Lockwood City, you'll have to get through me first. With that, he didn't even look at Evan again. He just took her hand and walked away. The two groups of bodyguards faced off, but in the end, no one made a move. Evan stood there, watching them leave, his narrow eyes filled with an unknown emotion. As for Stella, as she was being led out of the alley by Ethan, she looked at the strong yet gentle man holding her hand, and her face turned inexplicably red. How was it that every time she was cornered, Ethan happened to be there? Did this man plant a tracking device on her? Ethan led Stella to his car. Seeing her dazed look, he thought she was still thinking about what had just happened with Evan and said, "Don't worry. Lockwood City isn't New York. He can't do anything to you, huh?" Stella finally came to her senses. Hearing his concerned words, she turned her face away slightly. "I'm not scared. Why are you telling me this?" Ethan, however, lifted their joined hands. You're not scared. Then why are you holding my hand so tightly?" Stella's face flushed, and she immediately pulled her hand away. "You were the one holding my hand," she said angrily. Ethan didn't argue with her. He just took her back to his private villa. They sat facing each other in the living room. Ethan rubbed his temples and asked directly, "You were an underground operative in Los Angeles before?" This was his way of asking her to be honest. Stella didn't plan on hiding it from him, especially since Evan had already revealed it. Thinking about her past, her mood soured a bit, and she began to tell him the truth. That's right, I was raised by my master. He was the leader of the underground operatives. He was very strict with me from a young age, training me to be his successor. A year ago, he was killed in a dispute between several major families in Los Angeles. It was Evan's family that killed him. To avenge him, I retaliated against the Croft family and then fled back to Lockwood City. In just a few words, she had summarized over a decade of her life. Ethan asked again, "So you disguised yourself to escape the Croft family's pursuit?" She nodded. "That's right. After I returned to Lockwood City, I accidentally discovered my true identity and became my grandfather's granddaughter. But the identity of the Rivers heir is too high profile. I couldn't be sure there were no Croft family spies in Lockwood City, so I had to disguise myself to protect myself." "And Ivy?" Stella stared at him, thinking that Ethan still didn't fully believe she was Walter's real granddaughter. "Ivy is a fake. She's the daughter of the adoptive parents I found. I didn't know why she came to impersonate me before, but as soon as Evan appeared, I understood." The identity of the heir to Lockwood City's wealthiest man was something even Evan had to be wary of. Moreover, the Croft family's power in Lockwood City was not as great as it was in Los Angeles. If he rashly offended the Rivers family, it would not be good for him. So he needed to first destroy her identity as the Rivers' granddaughter, kick her out of the family, and then he could make his move. Ethan had clearly thought of this as well. "He wants to kick you out of the Rivers family and then kidnap you back to Los Angeles?" Chapter 36. Stella nodded. "To be able to tamper with my grandfather's DNA test for Ivy is not something an ordinary person can do. Only he could." Ethan understood. He asked again, "So what do you plan to do now?" "Now that I know Ivy's purpose, it's simple. Go back to the Rivers estate and kick her out." Seeing her confident expression, Ethan suddenly felt like he was being ignored. This little girl had no intention of relying on him, this powerful backer. It left him with no sense of accomplishment. "You don't need my help?" Stella raised an eyebrow. This Ethan was too quick to believe her. Honestly, everything she had told him was speculation. She had no proof yet, but he seemed to be convinced that she was telling the truth. Her ears felt a little hot for some reason. She shook her head. "I can handle it myself." "Fine, but remember to call your uncle if you can't handle it," she pouted. "I know." Ethan reached out and gently brushed a stray hair from her head, the gesture incredibly intimate and natural. Stella's heart beat a little faster. She looked at him strangely but didn't stop him. A few seconds later, she was suddenly pulled into a warm embrace. Ethan's voice was a little strained. "When I saw Evan touch your hand today, I really wanted to break it." With those words and that action, even a fool would know what he meant. Stella wanted to laugh, but she deliberately kept a straight face. Uncle is so good to his niece. "Ethan," he took her by the shoulders, his expression serious. "Stella Rivers, don't play dumb with me." So fierce as Stella pouted again, her expression coy. "What am I playing dumb about?" But she hadn't expected Ethan to be so direct. "I like you, Stella." She couldn't suppress the smile on her lips. She coughed awkwardly. "I'm very busy right now. I don't have time to think about these things. We'll talk about it later." That was the truth. Ethan hugged her again. "Then give me your answer after all this is over." After that, Stella disappeared for a few days. Even Ethan didn't know where she had gone. She had let Evan track her easily before, but that was intentional. Now that she was deliberately hiding, finding her would be difficult again. However, during this time, Ethan and Evan met a few more times. In the Blackwood Group's building, on the 62nd floor, in Ethan's office. Both men were dressed in formal suits, looking like elite businessmen, with none of the tension from their encounter in the alley. Evan spoke first. "Mr. Blackwood, I have a gift for you." Knowing he had come with ill intentions, Ethan slowly lifted his eyes, leaned back in his chair, and said calmly, "The Blackwood family has no dealings with the Croft family. I'm afraid I can't accept your gift, Mr. Croft." He refused without even looking. Evan smiled, not minding, and said, "You might not dislike it. I know you're investigating the technology developed by Xiaoming Tech in the US. Director Song of Xiaoming secretly poached your employees and even sent them to the US to do research to avoid your retaliation. Of course, no matter how much Xiaoming tried to hide, you still found them. A month ago, their research results were stolen. I assume they are now in your hands, Mr. Blackwood. Ethan's eyes were deep, his emotions unreadable. What are you trying to say? Evan had slowly walked up to him, with only Ethan's massive desk between them. Evan leaned on it with his left hand, a smile on his face. You know, what you have is their initial research result. Xiaoming has now developed a new, complete technology. I can help you get it. The condition? I want Sula. Chapter 37. Evan didn't beat around the bush. Bringing Sula back to Lowe's Angels to be dealt with by the family elders was his purpose in coming to Lockwood City. But with the Rivers family and the formidable Ethan Blackwood in his way, it was extremely difficult to make a move in Lockwood City. He knew that Ethan might not agree to his request immediately, but he hadn't expected Ethan to just glance at him and then let out a disdainful laugh. You think you can take her away with just Xiaoming? His voice was low. It was unclear if he thought Evan's offer was insufficient or if he found the idea of trading Xiaoming for Sula ridiculous. Evan pressed closer. Mr. Blackwood, let's be frank. Sula has been back in Lockwood City for less than half a year. You're just her uncle by association. There's no need to be so protective of her. I know you want to take down Xiaoming, and I've shown my utmost sincerity. Seeing that Ethan seemed unmoved, he added, I've heard that, Mr. Blackwood is a ruthless businessman who always puts profits before feelings. This is a very good deal. I think you know that. Ethan tapped his index finger slowly on the desk, as if he were actually considering Evan's proposal, just when he thought Ethan was about to agree. I am indeed a businessman who prioritizes profits, but Ethan smiled faintly, his tone calm but his gaze extremely sharp. She's an exception. Evan, don't even think about her again. Otherwise, I don't mind showing you what true ruthlessness is. Evan's eyes widened in shock. He hadn't expected Ethan to refuse him 3 days later. Stella, who had been missing for several days, finally reappeared. And she brought 2 unexpected people back to the Rivers estate. When Walter saw Stella, the heart that had been in suspense for nearly half a month finally settled. When Stella had run away from home, Walter had specially asked Ethan to find her. Ethan had found her, but he said she couldn't come back yet, and that he would protect her in secret. He had no idea what those 2 were up to. And when Ivy heard that Stella was back, she immediately went on high alert. Although Stella had been gone, Walter's attitude had remained ambiguous. He hadn't said he would acknowledge her, as if he were waiting for Stella to come back. Now that she was really back, Ivy was even more panicked, because she rushed downstairs, wanting to drive Stella away again as soon as possible. But when she saw the 2 plainly dressed people standing in the living room, who were completely out of place with the luxurious surroundings of the Rivers estate, she turned pale with fright. She even wanted to turn around and go back upstairs, but Stella spotted her and called out, Ivy, aren't you going to say hello to your parents? When Yu Xiumin saw his daughter, his old face flushed with shame. He and his wife were honest farmers. When Stella approached them and gave them $1 million to pretend to be her adoptive parents, they had accepted. $1 million it would take years of not eating or drinking to save that much. They had received such a great favor from her, yet their own daughter had shamelessly gone to her home to impersonate her. Yu Xiumin felt nothing but shame. He roared at Ivy on the stairs, You unfilial daughter, get down here. Walter stood by and watched, roughly understanding what Stella had been doing all this time. Having been discovered, Ivy couldn't run away. She had no choice but to walk down the stairs, glaring at Stella with hatred. But Stella then took out a DNA test report. This is the test report for you and Yu Xiumin. The results show that you are his biological child. Ivy, you're not going to say that your father is my grandfather's son, are you? Chapter 38. Before Ivy could argue, Yu Xiumin immediately said, No, I'm just an ordinary person. This girl is my biological daughter. She found that necklace at our house. You dropped it when you were staying with us. Ivy, tell me the truth right now. Who told you to do this? This is fraud. Ivy decided to throw caution to the wind. I don't know what you're talking about. I am grandfather's granddaughter. Fine. Then do you dare to do another DNA test? This time I'll go with you, Stella said lightly. She then moved closer to her and whispered in her ear, I guarantee that this time, even Evan Croft won't be able to help you. She knows Ivy's heart pounded. She knew that the person behind her was Evan Croft. Her legs began to tremble, and the words of denial she had prepared got stuck in her throat. Seeing her parents' disappointed and furious eyes, and Stella's calm and composed gaze, she thought of Evan, that mysterious and powerful man, and a glimmer of hope remained in her heart. Fine, I'll go. But I'll go upstairs to get my phone first. Stella allowed it. Ivy quickly ran back to her room, leaned against the door, and dialed Evan's number. Hello, Mr. Croft, I'm in trouble. That Stella brought my parents here. Didn't you say you would handle this for me? What do I do now? Ivy, I've already handled it for you once. You don't expect me to solve your problems forever, do you? Ivy's mind went blank, but she seemed to understand what Evan meant. She asked in despair, You're not going to help me anymore, are you? The person on the other end didn't deny it. Don't call me again. Then there was a series of beeps. Ivy slid down the door and sat on the floor, knowing that she had completely lost. Meanwhile, after Evan hung up on Ivy, his special assistant, who had witnessed the call, asked cautiously, Are you really going to trust Ethan Blackwood? The conversation between Evan and Ethan that day hadn't been a complete failure. Although Ethan had rejected Evan's offer to trade Xiaoming for Sula, he had given Evan another option. The Blackwood and Croft families would cooperate. Ethan would allow Evan to use the Blackwood family's connections to break into the domestic market. In return, Ethan would need to use the Croft family's connections when expanding overseas. This was a deal Evan couldn't lose. It also showed that Ethan was indeed a shrewd strategist. He had long since found out Evan's true purpose in coming to Lockwood City. Catching Sula was only part of it. The bigger reason was that the Croft family had their eyes on the growing domestic market and wanted a piece of the pie. But the domestic market was full of powerful players, and the families were intricately connected. It was difficult to get a foothold. Now that Ethan had extended an olive branch, only a fool would refuse. Although Sula had a grudge against the Croft family, she was just one operative. Letting her go in exchange for a chance to enter the Lockwood market was a deal that even the elders of his family couldn't argue with. A person like Ethan Blackwood is not a good enemy to have, but he's had his own slip-up, falling for a young girl. Evan smiled and blacklisted Ivy's number. Chapter 39. Without Evan's help, Ivy knew she was defeated. She couldn't go with Stella for another DNA test. She didn't dare to go out either, or her strict and traditional father would beat her to death. In the end, she chose to jump from the second-floor window of her room to escape. But she fell awkwardly and was discovered by the villa's security guards, who thought she was a thief. In the end, she was dragged away from the Rivers villa by Yu Schumann. She never returned to Lockwood City. With that matter settled, Stella finally moved back in. Seeing Stella's even thinner chin, Walter was filled with guilt and heartache. But Stella comforted him with great understanding. Grandfather, it's not your fault. You always believed in me. Moving out was my own idea. Please don't feel guilty. Then, after a moment of hesitation, she added, Grandfather, I'm the one who should be apologizing. I've actually been lying to you. Walter looked at his granddaughter's cute and charming face, a little puzzled. Stella had always been so well behaved. When had she ever lied to him? It was only when he saw her take off her black framed glasses and slowly reveal her true face. Walter was so shocked that his jaw dropped. Something big had happened in Lockwood City again. Walter Rivers was choosing a husband for his granddaughter. But in reality, it was just a choice between the three young masters of the Blackwood family. The Rivers estate. The three Blackwood brothers were gathered here again. Walter looked at the three young men with a smile. You all know why I've called you here today, right? Aiden thought to himself, of course I know. He looked at his two outstanding brothers, then thought of Stella Rivers. He pressed his temples. All right, besides being a bit ugly, she's not so bad. Grandpa Rivers, I know what you mean. Let me be the one to get engaged to Stella. His expression was one of heroic self-sacrifice. After 3 seconds of silence, Walter gave him a rap on the head and snorted, In your dreams. You want to marry our Stella, but she might not want to marry you. Julian also said in a low voice, Aiden, don't talk nonsense. Aiden sat down, feeling wronged. I'm sacrificing myself for the greater good. Why are you unhappy? Just then, another voice came from the door. Mr. Rivers, is Stella home? Ethan strode in from outside, acting as if he were very familiar with Stella. Seeing his 3 nephews there, he added, Oh, it seems I've come at an inconvenient time. He said that, but there was not a hint of embarrassment on his face. Just then, Stella came downstairs, still sleepy, clearly having just woken up. When Aiden saw her face, he jumped to his feet. "Stella's friend, why are you here again?" Julian and Dylan also looked over, but their expressions were not as shocked. Walter said proudly, "What do you mean, Stella's friend?" "This is Stella. She was just playing a joke on you all with that disguise before." Aiden was so shocked he couldn't speak, just pointing at Stella and stammering, You. Ethan, however, had a "I knew it all along" expression. He walked up to Stella naturally and suddenly asked her, "Where are my pajamas? It's time to return them to me, right?" Now it wasn't just Aiden, even Walter was shocked. What did that mean? Why did Stella have Ethan's pajamas? What was their relationship? Stella was clearly taken aback by his nerve. "It's just a set of pajamas. Do you have to come all the way to my house to demand them back?" Ethan, the schemer, replied, "Of course. I'm afraid you'll sleep with them and then refuse to acknowledge it, refusing to give them back." Chapter 40. Sleep with them and refuse to acknowledge it? This man was insane. Why did he have to make borrowing his pajamas sound so suggestive? Stella's ears turned red without her realizing it. She quietly moved closer and pinched Ethan's waist, her eyes fierce. "What are you doing?" Ethan didn't mind at all. Instead, he took her hand and smiled gently, as if asking her to play along. "Be good." Walter, seeing their public display of affection, already understood what was going on. This rascal Ethan had come to declare his sovereignty. Ethan led Stella to a seat next to Julian. He glanced at Julian, who seemed a bit down, and then said to Walter, "Since everyone is here, there's something I'd like to say to you." Walter's expression was not good. "Speak. I'd like to see what nonsense you can come up with." Ethan, regarding the marriage between the Blackwood and Rivers families, our family's opinion is that the 3 boys are still too young and immature. We're afraid they're not good enough for Stella. After much thought, I'm the only suitable one. What do you think, Walter? Nonsense. Look at your age, have you no shame? But he still respected Stella's opinion. Walter asked, "Stella, what do you think?" Being asked about such things in public, she finally couldn't help but blush. She hated Ethan even more for coming here and causing a scene. She said in a low voice, I don't have any opinion." Before she could finish, Ethan interrupted, "I've already discussed it with Stella. Her previous intention was to get engaged after dealing with the Ivy matter." Engaged? Stella was about to ask when she had ever said that, but then she remembered saying something like, "We'll talk about it later," at the villa. Had he twisted her words to this extent? So annoying, but when Walter saw that they were in love, he couldn't say anything against it. He trusted Ethan, and he was sure he could protect Stella better. However, Walter still put on a displeased expression and stood up. Then the engagement will happen after Stella graduates. Before leaving, Walter warned Ethan again, "If you dare to do anything before she graduates, I won't forgive you." Ethan nodded in agreement. "Don't worry." And so, what was supposed to be a grand husband selection ceremony came to an abrupt end with Ethan's arrival. Stella went from being a potential fiancé for the 3 brothers to their future aunt. Aiden and Dylan's expressions were indescribable. With Ethan there, they didn't dare to say anything and quickly left. Only Julian remained seated next to them. Finally, he slowly asked, "Is this your choice?" Stella was taken aback. Thinking back on her time in Lockwood City, she couldn't deny that she liked Ethan. Otherwise, she wouldn't have let him talk nonsense in front of her grandfather. Stella nodded. Julian's heart sank. Maintaining his cool and calm demeanor, he said, "Good," and also stood up to leave. But his departing figure seemed somewhat hurried, somewhat lost. Ethan, however, paid him no mind. He just nudged Stella's shoulder again. "The pajamas, Stella Rivers. Give them back to me. Don't go back on your word." Stella was annoyed with him. "I know, you're so stingy," but Ethan then suddenly hugged her. Their breaths mingled, and the atmosphere suddenly became incredibly intimate. He said in a hoarse voice, "Are you willingly engaged to me?" Stella rested her chin on his shoulder and asked with a laugh, "Did you give me a chance to be unwilling?" "So you're unwilling." He was so annoying hearing a hint of grievance in the man's tone. Stella's heart softened a little. She wrapped her arms around his waist and coaxed, I'm willing. Perhaps from the first time we met with my true face, our future together was already destined." Ethan's expression finally brightened. He smiled triumphantly and held Stella tightly. "Stella, I like you. I know you've said it before. I like you. He repeated it tirelessly. Stella finally understood, her eyes sparkling. She moved closer to his ear and said, word by word, I like you too. The end.